Come on. All right, ready to go.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Senator Jim Dill. I'm the chair of ACF committee, and I want to welcome everybody here this morning. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 work sessions scheduled for today. And so we may as well start right in with introductions. So Representative Landry.
Good morning, Representative Scott Landry. I live in Farmington, represent District 113, the towns of Farmington and New Sharon and Franklin County.
Representative McCray.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. I'm David McCray. I live in Fort Fairfield up in the county. I represent District 148 that is under full sunshine this morning. Have a good day.
Representative Hall.
Good morning, Randy Hall, representing District 114, 6 towns in southern Franklin County, wrapped right around Representative Landry's district.
Representative Osher. You're muted, Representative.
Good morning. I'm Lori Osher, representative of most of Orono, District 123, the home of the University of Maine.
Representative Schofield.
Good morning, Senator Dill, and good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Schofield, and I represent House District 112. I live in Weld, Maine, and I represent 17 towns and townships in Franklin and Somerset counties, the High Peaks region of Maine, and I wrap around Representative Hall and Representative Landry's districts.
Sounds like an onion here. We're getting outer and outer skins here. Senator Black.
Good morning. Senator Black from Wilton, representing Senate District 17, which is all of Franklin County and 4 towns in Kennebec.
So you're the outermost layer. Representative O'Neill.
Got the jokes today. Good morning. My name's Maggie O'Neill, and I represent House District 15, which is in Saco.
Representative Pluker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I represent House District 95, which is Warren, Hope, Appleton, and part of Union. Thanks for having me.
Senator Maxman.
Hi, I'm Chloe Maxman. I represent Senate District 13, which is all of Lincoln County, except for Dresden, plus Washington and Windsor.
And again, I'm Jim Dill. I represent Senate District number 5, which is Northern Penobscot County. And we have Cheryl McGowan with us as our clerk. And she tries to keep all of us running smoothly here on the Zoom. And Karen Netto is our analyst who will be summarizing all of our bills and helping us with the technical difficulties on those. And with that, just remind everybody to stay muted until you're ready to speak, to cut down on background noise, and we can go from there. So I will open the work session on our first bill, which is LD 630, an act to prohibit shelf-stable products from being sold as cider and to amend the definition for those products that are heated. Karen.
So this needs to be taken off the table.
Can I have a motion to take this off the table?
I move that we take it off the table.
Been moved by Representative O'Neill and seconded by Representative Landry. All in favor, just raise your hands, please. Everybody that I can see has their hand raised, so we'll take it off the table. Okay, Karen.
All right, so just to review, the current law is that a person may not sell, advertise, offer, or expose for sale any product labeled as cider if that product has been heated to a temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit or higher for more than 10 seconds. So what this bill proposes to do is reduce that time to 5 seconds, and then also add to the prohibition a product that does not require refrigeration from pressing through purchase. So I think some of the committee members had questions about whether the Food and Drug Administration had a definition of cider. And it's my understanding that the department did reach out to the FDA and learned that the feds only have a definition for hard cider. Cider itself seems to fall under the definition of juice. So there is no conflict with our state definition and federal law regulation. And other states have different definitions. For instance, New York requires the product to be pasteurized in order to be labeled as cider. And of course, Maine law provides that it actually requires a warning label saying that this product has not been pasteurized for cider. So I think we also got testimony after the last work session from Dr. Bolton from the University of Maine Cooperative Extension, expressing some concerns about shortening the duration of the heating time in particular. I don't know if he's going to be joining us this morning. I do see Celeste Poulin has joined us, and I don't know if Senator Timberlake, I don't see him in the attendees, but I know at one point he wanted to speak to the committee. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Are there any questions for Karen? Senator Black?
Yes, the person from University of Maine expressed concerns about shortening the heating time, but that doesn't change our definition or our way we process fresh cider. I mean, that would be on what would be coming in from shelf stable. Am I correct, Karen?
Yeah, I mean, our definition of cider says that it's not pasteurized. And I think his concern is that shortening the time to 5 seconds would not pasteurize the product. So,
yeah. But we're not proposing any changes to, you know, we're just
the warning label, no.
Yeah, and Senator Timberlake is trying to get a link. He thought it started at 10 and he's on the road, so he's trying to get a link to get on. But that's where that is. Thank you.
All right, Representative Landry.
I called the outfit mayors who sent us cider. A lot of you may have received it after speaking with Senator Black yesterday. And I was told that the cider that they sent us was their shelf stable, even though they sent it refrigerated. And Karen, you said New York says it has to be pasteurized to be cider?
That's what I read in an email from the Department of ACF.
A lot of conflicting rules on this.
Well, yeah, as the department said, you know, different states have different definitions of cider.
I've been doing a lot of research and it all tastes pretty good.
Senator Black?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, my only concern is that you know, why I put the bill in was that I feel that we need to make a differential between shelf stable cider, as the bill stated. We're not asking to change any heating times or any pasteurizations time. We're just looking to change or define between our local producers, our local farmers that are trying to produce a crop here in Maine and compete against big business out of state. We're able to, you know, pasteurize thousands and thousands of gallons of this stuff and ship it in here at a lower price and affect our local sales of local cider. And that's my concern. I think we need to distinguish somehow within a labeling a distinction between local fresh cider and what we're bringing in that's shelf stable. And I think if as some of you tasted the stuff that we had sent to us, it was, it was good. I mean, it was, I know a lot of my fresh cider that I buy locally does taste better. It tastes more like fresh cider. There wasn't the sediments in it. There was some, it was a little cloudy. But I believe in the process they do. I'm not, if Senator Timberlake was on, he could define it better. But I believe before they pasture, or heat it, they have a holding tank where they put some kind of a agent on it to take the pectin out of it. That's why you don't see. Oh, there's Senator Timberlake right there. He can talk to the issues of processing it, because that's what they do. And we have a number of other farms in the state of Maine that use a lot of their lower grade utility apples for cider, and would use more of them if the market was there. But I'll stop right there for now, if it's all right with you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. I have a couple of the hands up. We'll go to those first. Representative McCray.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Number one, I didn't get any cider of any type shipped to me. Number two, that's not really a complaint. I just heard about it. Anyway, my comment or question is, it reminds me back a year or so ago when we were talking about Maine raised meat, Maine raised beef, Maine raised this. And would it not help to have a label on each container, fresh Maine apple cider, or directly from farmer to you, or whatever? That would sell it to me. Thank you.
Representative O'Neill.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I wanted to hear from Director Poulin on the legwork that she's done between our last meeting and this one. Just an update, please.
Sure. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Celeste Poulin, and I'm Director of the Division of Quality Assurance and Regulation at the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. What I have been doing on this for the past week is reaching out to counterparts at the FDA. I have reached out first to our retail contact. He referred me to our district liaison, and the district liaison has since referred our questions about this to the Centers for Food Science and Nutrition. I have not heard back from them yet, but the consensus seems to be that aside from hard cider, which is defined for, it looked to me to be for the purposes of subjecting it to the federal alcohol tax, there really isn't any federal definition of cider. And states do vary widely in how they treat the products. I believe Karen also referenced that after a very bad incident of foodborne illness from fresh cider in the 1990s, New York State now only allows pasteurized cider to be sold at retail. But I did not see anything that in the FDA rules that would prohibit the state of Maine from defining our fresh cider however we choose to do.
A follow-up, please, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Thanks for that update on all the legwork that you've done over the last week. So I'm hearing there's no issue with the definition portion. Do you have an update as to the labeling portion of the question?
I did not ask FDA anything about labeling. It would be the same labeling requirements that we would have for any product. You would need to have the nutritional values and whatever the contents of the container are. If someone has added additional product or preservative, that would need to be reflected on the label.
Okay. So if and maybe I'm not following, but does this change in our definition change the way folks are able to label? Because that's what I was hearing from our last meeting, and that was kind of what was of significance, is whether people from out of state could ship something in and label it as cider.
Well, I think that's what 630 kind of hinges on. If there are out-of-state companies that are shipping products that they're labeling cider into the state that are shelf stable, my understanding is that this bill would preclude them from selling those products as cider in the state of Maine.
Okay, so I'm hearing the update on the ability to vary on definition, but no clarity as to labeling.
I'm not sure what your question is on labeling. I mean, are you asking if our labeling requirements would prohibit somebody from selling their product in Maine?
No, just can we make that distinction in labeling? The same way, I think we went through this same kind of conversation as Representative McCray raised with the Maine meat.
The meat thing was a little bit different because that we handled through some distribution things, and I don't really want to conflate the issues. I think, or at least the way I'm understanding 630, this is about how we in the state of Maine want to define our cider product. And I think as a couple of other members of the committee have already mentioned, I too have bought the preservative stuff by accident. And once you do it once, you don't do it twice. You read that label and you look for fresh, unpasteurized, keep refrigerated.
All right, thanks for the update on your background work.
Do we run afoul of FDA in any way if we change the requirements from 10 seconds to 5 seconds?
That I would really feel more comfortable getting an answer from Centers for Food Science and Nutrition. And I have not heard back from them on that. My understanding is that I know Cooperative Extension has some significant concerns about whether or not that would render the product safe or whether it would still allow for some bacterial growth. I almost think that the temperature and timing issue could be dealt with separately from the strict definition piece. And we might be able to allay some concerns if we dealt with that as a separate issue.
Yeah, I think if I remember Dr. Bolton's letter, he was concerned that if we heated it to 5 seconds, that could be worse than not heating it or whatever, because it might warm it up just enough to promote bacterial growth. Is that what I understood? Yeah.
Yes.
Senator Black.
Would it be possible to see if we can get some clarification on some of these issues from Senator Timberlake? I believe he's available.
Yep. Just a second. Jeff, Representative Gifford had his hand up. Do you have a question, Representative Gifford? Where'd you go? You're muted, Representative Gifford.
All right. Sorry about that. I wanted the same question that Senator Black had. I see Senator Timberlake waving his hand there in the background, so I know he wants to clarify something. So if we give him a chance to speak.
Sure. Senator Timberlake, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Mr. Chair, and everybody on the AFC committee. I suppose I owe you all treats now because I'm testifying in front of a committee that I once served on. I am Senator Jeff Timberlake. I represent Senate District 22. I got some comments I would like to make at some time. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to work this bill and do due diligence on it. I'm sorry I missed the first part of the meeting. I thought it started at 10 and I was putting copper on apple trees this morning, Senator Dill, to kill some fire blight. So I think where I'd like to start is one of the things that says, you know, we just put the label and say Maine fresh cider and that make people buy it. The problem we're running into in the cider industry in Maine is that the big supermarkets, and I'll pick on them a little bit, Hannaford, Walmart, Shaw's, these bigger markets, they go out to bid price on who process it the lowest. So you may not be able to go into the Hannafords or the Walmarts or the Shaws or any of them to buy Maine fresh cider anymore, because they're going to carry whatever was coming on the low price. And what's happened to the cider industry in exchange for that is, years ago, there was, you'll remember back, a lot of you remember back, there was Levitt Orchards, which became LP Farms, which became Cooper Brothers, ourselves, Randall Orchards, Lakeside Orchards, Lemerick, Greenwoods, Giles, all were doing major production and supplying all the food chains in the state of Maine, and all still have the capacity to do it. But once we went to the ultra pasteurized cider, it changed the market in the state of Maine. And what happened is people would go buy cider, and you got sent, some of you got sent a gallon of semi-processed cider, and then you got a gallon of apple juice. Well, you see the difference between fresh cider and processed, what I call processed cider, that's been heat treated to 180 degrees for 10 seconds, is it also changes the flavor. And how do I know that? Because about 10 years ago, we was pasteurizing cider in our plant and with heat treated. And the problem is our sales dropped off so dramatically that we had to get rid of the heat pasteurization and go to UV pasteurization, because there is a difference in the changing of the flavor. And why does it change the flavor? Well, when you heat cider to 180 degrees for 10 seconds, it changes the consistency. It kills all of the bacteria in the cider. And you also have to, in order to do that, you have to depectinize the cider. And what that means is we have a chemical, we used to use it, we don't use it anymore, but we actually do use some of it when we do hard cider. But you have 2,000 to 5,000 gallon tanks, and you throw it's like a white powder, you mix in on top of it and you let it set for 2 days, and all the pectin settles out of the cider. That's how Meyer Brothers, when they say it's unfiltered, well, it is unfiltered, but they settled everything out of it, so there's nothing left in it. And once you pasteurize it, the flavor changes. And what it's done is all of the apple growers in the state of Maine, because of this process, and I believe that cider should be pasteurized, but it should be UV pasteurized so that you don't change the flavor. What that process does is it changes the flavor. And what it's done is it's cut down on all the sale of cider, that when moms and dads buy cider to take home to their kids, the kids don't like it as well as they would if they bought it fresh straight from the farm. And we've now changed the whole consistency in the product level. And cider sales in the state of Maine and cider producers in Maine are dropping off like fleas, because we have actually changed what cider is. And so if we want to keep our apple industry going, and we want to be thinking about this for the milk industry in the future too, because the same thing is happening with ultra pasteurization of milk, that we need to start looking at how do we keep our label. And the fresh Maine cider can't be above more than 5 seconds at that temperature. Is the reason that is once you go above that, you actually change the consistency. And I think, Senator Dill, you would be right in saying that it's probably not going to meet, it won't meet FDA approval for pasteurization. But then again, if they want to go to 180 degrees for 10 seconds, I think they need to create a different label that says it's processed pasteurized, or processed cider or some other thing. And I think that's for the state to figure out with the labeling. We've had to do that with a lot of things over the last few years. And so that's the fast as I can spit it out, spewl, Chairman Dill and members of the committee, willing to answer any questions, give you background, just a little more background on me. We've been processing cider for probably 40 years at Ricker Hill Orchards. We used to process somewhere up to 750,000 gallons a year, and now we're processing about 275,000 gallons a year and dropping. And I think it's a concern to all the apple industry in Maine, and that's why one of the reasons this bill is before you. We would like to see the stores in the state of Maine carrying Maine product, Maine cider. So I'm sorry I took so long.
No problem. Representative Landry.
Thank you, Senator Timberlake. I certainly agree that we have to do something to keep Maine. But I had a question about at heating it to 165 at 5 seconds is what Meyer told me yesterday, this product they sent. Is 165 at 5, do you feel that changes the flavor that much? Or does it have to go to, would you say 180 for 10?
I can't remember what the numbers were. It's a long time ago. But once you go above 155 for 5, once you exceed 155 degrees, you change the consistency of cider.
Okay.
It changes. It starts the process. What the process starts is it starts the process to apple juice. Not quite. It doesn't get it all the way to apple juice, but it starts the process to turning it into apple juice. Because the difference between cider and apple juice is how much you heat it, how much you cook it. Okay. And so that's why everybody in Maine, Giles, Greenwoods, Lemues, that's why all of us use UV pasteurization, so that when you buy our cider, even though it's been pasteurized, it's gone through a UV treatment, which is a glass tube about 3 inches in diameter with ultraviolet lights around it, and the cider just passes through it, and it just kills any of the E. coli that's in there, so that cider, all the other bacteria stay in there, which makes cider good. And everything, the pectin stays in there, it's not filtered out. So if you pick up a bottle of what most of us produce and you let it set overnight or for a day, it'll have a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch of sediment on the bottom. Well, that's all a pectin. And if you look what the others sent you, there's very little on the bottom, maybe a tiny little bit, but not much. But all the heavy pectins are taken out. And that's the difference. Once you exceed 155 degrees, you're really changing the flavor of cider.
Thank you. Could the answer be then UV being the qualification?
Well, UV can be the qualification. I would agree with that. If Meyer Brothers UV treated it, their cider would taste like our cider. Mm-hmm. But because, and I'm picking on Meyer Brothers, not because they're the ones that sent you the cider and that's the stuff you had there. But there's distributors in Maryland, another big distributor in Maryland that is shipping a lot of stuff into the state of Maine that runs this same process, and they all sell it as fresh cider. But if you drink it, it's not fresh cider.
Right.
And that's I think what the farmers of the state of Maine are asking you to look at.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for your insight.
So Director Poulin, do you know if UV pasteurization is equivalent to heat pasteurization, especially in the eyes of FDA?
That I do not know. And I think, as Senator Timberlake has said, there does seem to be some real kind of chemical process that's happening when you heat the cider to above a certain degree. I would really need to defer to my counterparts at the University Cooperative Extension on that, because I'm not sure what chemical changes are taking place in the cider or juice that's the primary element in this process.
Senator Landry, do you have another question or?
Senator Dill, can I just answer?
Sure.
I can tell you for a fact that UV treated meets FDA approval for pasteurization of cider.
Okay.
Because we have to meet that and where it has to qualified and USDA inspected and USDA certified.
All right. Representative O'Neill, would you follow up with the question here for a minute? I'm going to call Jason Bolton to see if he's available and see if we can get him on here. So I know Senator Black has a question, so I'm going to mute here for a second.
Sure thing. Senator Black.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Isn't part of the problem why the cider from out of state, especially from New York, has to be heated to a greater capacity and not using the UV is because of the state law within New York. I mean, their law requires them to heat it because that's a state law in New York. We don't have that law here, and so they probably can't they probably have to do that in their processing plant in order to do the cider, and that's why they're shipping that type of cider in here, is because they can't get by with just the light. Maybe the department or Senator Timberlake could answer that for me.
I can tell you that that New York, I believe, I'm not 100% positive, but I'm like 98% positive that UV pasteurization is legal in New York, and that one of the reasons the big processors don't do it is because it's a much slower process. You can't flow the cider through the UV machine, is computer controlled, so it's a lot slower process to make sure that you get it treated right. So the cost of operation, as far as how fast you can produce it, slows down.
Madam Chair, may I have a follow-up? Can we ask, I saw somebody from the department nodding when I was talking. Maybe she has more information about the New York law.
Yes, the New York law does require pasteurization, but it includes UV as one of the allowable ways to do that. I'm not clear on what is involved specifically in each of those different processes. So I am going to assume that Senator Timberlake is correct when he says that the UV is perhaps more costly and time consuming than heat pasteurization. And that may be why larger producers don't utilize that process. But UV is allowable as a means of pasteurization under New York law.
Thank you.
So I just tried Dr. Bolton and he didn't answer. I left him a voicemail, so we'll see if he gets, and I sent him the link, so we'll see if he gets on, but he's probably not available. He might be teaching class. So anyway, do we have other questions? Representative Landry.
Sorry to be so picky, but I forgot to ask you, Senator Timberlake, the UV, I assume, is not shelf stable. That means it's going to ferment more rapidly if you leave it out.
Thank you for the question, Representative Landry. And yes, you are correct. The UV does not make it shelf stable. You have to refrigerate it. The only thing the UV does is kill the E. coli bacteria, which is the one that got all the kids sick up in Newport, Maine, and had the process. So the UV treating doesn't change the consistency or anything else. And you can get about 3 to 4 weeks, maybe 60 days out of it. But a little bit more than that if you keep it really cold, but it does not change it. You are correct.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Senator Black, did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand there. No. Are there other questions for either Director Poulin or Senator Timberlake? Further discussion, comments? Senator Black.
Are you looking for a motion at this time?
If you want to make a motion, certainly we can entertain it.
I would make a motion that we that ought to pass with the that they would have to come up with something besides cider on their bill, on their labeling, in order to sell the processed cider in the state of Maine.
Okay. Further, Representative Underwood, are you seconding that?
Yes, sir, I am. Thank you very much, Senator Dale.
Discussion. Just so you know, I did get a text back from Jason Bolton. He's in class till 9:45. He can join us at that time. Yeah, just to let you know that. Representative Fluker.
I just wanted to clarify with the motion, are we including the 5 to 10 seconds language that's in the bill, or are we just referring to the does not require refrigeration from pressing through purchase?
As the bill was stated.
Okay. Then my follow-up is, are we, I guess I'm not clear why move it from 10 seconds to 5 seconds. How that protects our local cider, if somebody could help me with that.
Well, can I answer that?
Certainly.
We need to define in the labeling, and maybe my motion should have said in that the labeling would be distinct between local cider. Add that to the bill as an amendment that we need to define fresh local cider versus processed cider, and allow the state to define that in rules or statutes.
So are you offering OTP or OTPA?
Say that again.
Are you offering an ought to pass as it's written or ought to pass as amended?
Ought to pass as amended.
Okay. And am I the only one who's unclear about what the amendment is? I see Karen shaking her head. I'm not the only one. Okay.
Could you state your motion again, Senator Black? Of course, it'd be easier if you unmuted yourself so we could hear you. Did we lose him now? There you are, Senator Black.
Am I back?
You're back now.
That my motion is to include the bill with the amendment that we need to define the difference between fresh local cider and processed cider. And if they're going to sell it in the state of Maine, they've got to come up with some other definition than cider. Is that clear enough?
Representative.
That's what the bill does, though, as written.
Okay, so
I don't think you need to amend it.
don't need the amendment. I was trying to clarify it a little bit, but don't need the amendment then.
Well, I mean, what the bill does is it reduces 10 seconds to 5, and then it also adds to the prohibition that the product does not require refrigeration from pressing through purchase. So if anyone has a product outside of those parameters, it cannot be labeled as cider. Which
does that answer Representative Pluka's answer of what it does for Maine farmers is the question. I want to make sure that we include in the motion or a definition, so we definitely are trying to help our Maine farmers, more, define cider.
Well, I think Representative Pluker wants to understand why going from 10 seconds of heating to 5 seconds of heating, why that's important. I think talking about how this would help Maine is kind of editorializing that's not something that you would put in statute. I mean, that would be something that you would say in caucus or floor speech or something. So I don't know if I'm Representative Pluker, you just want to understand how going from 10 seconds to 5 seconds helps protect the integrity of fresh Maine apple cider.
Thank you, Karen. That's exactly right. Perhaps Senator Timberlake has a good answer for me.
Go ahead, Senator Timberlake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Pluker. The difference is, Representative, that once you exceed 155 degrees for 5 seconds, you change the consistency of cider and it starts to become more like a juice. It doesn't become juice. It starts to get more like it. And that's why the once you go to 10 seconds, it's over. Basically what you're saying is heat treated cider, heat treated pasteurization in Maine that gets to meet the FDA level is going to be very hard to sell in Maine. You got to come up with a different name for it. And so that's why the 5 second was put in. If you stay under 5 seconds at 155 degrees, it doesn't seem to change the consistency much, but it's not going to meet, in all honesty, the FDA approval. So we're saying that basically we're accepting cold pasteurization in this bill that's UV treated. So you can do cider, anybody can do it by UV machines. And that's the difference, because you change the consistency once you exceed 155.
Thank you. And a follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Do we have Maine producers who are not using UV pasteurization and are using the 10 seconds at 155 pasteurization?
There is not a farmer in the state of Maine using heat-treated pasteurization.
Okay. Thank you.
So then, Senator Timberlake, why don't we just change the bill rather than messing around with heating and 5 seconds versus 10 seconds? Why don't we just call it, to be called fresh Maine cider, it has to undergo UV pasteurization?
Because thank you, Senator Dill, for the question, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one of the things we was trying to do was to not let them try to get cider back on the shelves in Maine, farm produced cider back on the shelves in the bigger stores in Maine. You have a hard time finding fresh Maine cider on the supermarket shelves in Maine, other than little local stores. And we were trying to find a way to somehow get the Walmarts, the Hannafords, the Shaws, those stores to carry Maine cider again. And so if you let them still let them call it cider, and the only difference is label, well, I could tell you that Walmart and Hannaford and Shaw's, they don't really care if it's Maine or not. They just want to sell product. And we're trying to find a way so people in Maine can buy local product from the producers. And this is what has drove down the production of cider in Maine, is this process and this huge organizations who are ultra pasteurizing to get shelf stable, to put it on the floor, to do it. And you may be right, Senator Dill, that may be the simplest way. But the reason it got put in is once you exceeded that, you should no longer be able to call it cider. It should be called processed apple juice or semi-processed apple juice. But it's not cider.
Sorry to kind of monopolize here for a second, but I'm just trying to get it straight to follow up with Representative Fluker. If we said that the definition of cider is, in the state of Maine, is only UV pasteurized cider, wouldn't that do what you're doing, even though Dill's Orchards in New Hampshire could then do UV pasteurization, send it to Maine or wherever, and still call it cider? But we've limited it to one type of pasteurization and calling that cider in the state of Maine. So therefore, if I heat treat it coming into the state of Maine, we couldn't call it cider, we'd have to call it something else. Is that what I'm hearing you say, Senator Timberlake?
I couldn't have said it better, Chairman Dill.
All right, other questions? Representative Landry. You're muted, Representative.
Back again. Looking at the title of the bill, I would think the shelf-stable products is the key. The UV, as we just discussed, is not shelf-stable, and it's not heat-treated. Doesn't that pretty much take in what we're worried about, Senator Timberlake?
Trying to unmute. And thank you, Representative. I think Senator Dill couldn't have said it any better. If you just went to what he said, you've really accomplished exactly what was intended of this bill. I think we may have got into the weeds too much, which is some things what we do when we try to start defining out there. but I think cold pasteurization, heat treated, I think Senator Dill hit it on the nail. And that's what I think, Representative Landry. But
Very good.
you are somewhat correct, and it works either way. But you're not, what Senator Dill says defines cider as cold treated ultraviolet pasteurization, and New Hampshire can bring it. New York processors could bring it to Maine. New Hampshire processors can do UV, and it's all legal, and they could sell it in Maine, and it doesn't stop anybody.
Very good. Sounds good. Thank you.
Representative McCray.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My only concern was, and this was about 10 minutes ago, hoping to get Mr. Bolton on, not that I necessarily had a question, but it seems as though some people did have a question for him. And I was going to ask if we could table, but we are now past 9:45 anyway.
He's
so
trying, I just got a text from him. He's trying to get on.
Okay.
So I just asked Cheryl to say, yep, he's on now. There he is. Welcome, Dr. Bolton.
Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Jason Bolton, Food Safety Specialist for University of Maine Cooperative Extension, and I'm also the area coordinator of the innovation program in the business school.
I'm guessing there'll be several questions for you, but right now we're focusing around the difference between heat pasteurization of cider, UV pasteurization, and what happens if we follow the guidelines of going from a 10-second pasteurization method to a 5-second. And I believe your letter raised concerns that if we went to 5 seconds, that may be worse than almost doing nothing because it may heat it up just enough to promote the growth of some of the bacteria. So could you address that first, and then we'll open it up to other questions.
Yeah, sure. I mean, depending upon some of the parameters of the product itself, so the cider in question, depending upon the pH, and so that depends on the variety and the acids that are present in those different apples and things like that. That 10 seconds may not be enough. So it does depend. The research kind of states that. Now, 5 seconds, I can't find any research other than a very few situations where they were doing some acidification. So they're adding acids to the cider where 5 seconds provided, in most cases, not even enough lethality. So enough kill of the potential bacteria that could be present. So by putting it down to 5 seconds, there's not enough evidence that shows that would really pasteurize the product. So that was my concern. I did speak with another expert, food safety expert out of Cornell, who specializes in juice related HACCP and food safety issues. And he voiced the same concerns that 5 seconds would not be enough, especially at that temperature. If you were to increase the temperature, then there's a possibility that, I mean, for example, at 182 degrees, you barely need a second for most of the target organisms that we're looking at.
Okay. Could you comment now on the UV pasteurization process?
Yeah, so with that, I mean, it's a very common it's not a heat treatment, I should say. It's a very common treatment for ensuring that you don't get survival of certain pathogens that could cause foodborne illness. And so there are a lot of different companies that I work with that utilize that technology, and you can get equivalency in that type of pasteurization, but it doesn't require heat. And it still requires a validated process to follow. So the amount of time that it takes to go through the system, the light to come in contact with that light, that UV light, and also the intensity of the light. It works pretty well with cider, and it works pretty well with cider that is even relatively turbid or cloudy. So there are a few companies in Maine that utilize that, and they have to label it differently, but that's a FDA requirement. That's not something that necessarily means that it's less safe.
So then kind of one last question then the UV process would be basically, as you just said, if I heard you correctly, with FDA would be equivalent to heat pasteurization. But one of the big issues we've been having is, and I know they wanted to ask this question of you, is for whatever reason, heat pasteurization seems to change the taste, which is probably due to some chemical process due to heating. Can you briefly touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, when you heat any food product, you're going to change it in some way. There are small amounts of changes that obviously occur with the light pasteurization. Sometimes what people might believe is kind of going on, and some of the science that said that is you get sometimes some of the solids that change, and so they might drop out or fall to the bottom of a bottle over time when you've heat pasteurized. And so you are going to change aspects of it chemically, and the physiology of it will change. I looked into some sensory analysis data to see if I could figure anything that was conclusive around that. And I couldn't find anything that was, peer reviewed, reported, but there's some evidence to show that there is a change, and that people can detect that. But also there was another study that showed that when people in a blind study, they could detect a difference, but they didn't have a preference. And that could be the question here is preference. What do people prefer? And that also is based on the individual. So,
sure. Representative Landry, you're all set. Are there other questions for Dr. Bolton? So I guess my question, one last question I would have for you, Dr. Bolton, is we're kind of trying to wrestle with how to do a labeling, etc. So in your expert opinion, if we said, all right, let's call fresh cider in the state of Maine labeled as cider, and the only thing that could be labeled as cider would be UV pasteurized cider, do you see any FDA problems with that? Health-wise, safety-wise?
I have to think about that a little bit, but from a safety point of view, as long as they're like anything, if it's heat processed, if it's UV light processed, they have to have a validated process that shows that it is doing what it's supposed to do. So that's the FDA looks at a 5-log reduction of bacteria. So it's a substantial reduction of pathogens that could be present in that product, making it a safer product. Okay. And so as long as that is, and that's, gone through that process and they've validated it, then there shouldn't be a safety difference between that and a heat processed.
So if I had an apple orchard and I decided I wanted to produce cider, and I went out to wherever and I bought a UV pasteurization equipment, could I just assume that the apple liquid that I'm putting in the front end of the processing that goes through the UV process comes out the other end, can I just assume that has met the requirements, or do I have to do something to test that end product to make sure I'm doing whatever I'm supposed to be doing?
It isn't necessarily testing the end product. I mean, that should be something, and I say should, not required, but that should be something that you're doing just to see what's going on. It's an indicator of the safety of the product, but the real test is just like with heat pasteurization. There are certain measurements that have to be taken within the instrument to make sure that piece of equipment is operating properly. And so the company that sells that can provide a lot of that guidance. And then there's, like I said, I have a colleague out of Cornell that helps folks out with that. I don't work in that area. I've done heat pasteurization, but not UV light pasteurization. However, I'm familiar with it, and we've done some projects with it. We have an archaic unit at the university that doesn't work anymore, but so I am familiar with that process, but I just don't perform that duty for folks in the state of Maine. So yes, they would have to go through that. They would have to take those specific measurements, and then that should satisfy that. I don't know if there are folks in the state of Maine that are heat pasteurizing, so I'm not sure how that would change anybody that's doing that, or anybody that would want to do that. It pushes them down the route of light pasteurization opposed to heat.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Representative McCray.
Yes, this is a little bit tangential, but Dr. Bolton, you brought up, you were speaking of pasteurization, as we all have been for quite some time now. So let me swing over to milk. When I buy pasteurized milk, it has been heated up probably to the number you spoke of, 182 degrees or what have you. Yet that can't kill all of the bacteria because it still goes bad in my fridge after 8-10 days. So the pasteurization processes we're talking about with milk, anything dairy or apple cider for that matter, is not going to eliminate all bacteria, because if it did, it would have a shelf life forever, as long as it stayed sealed. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great observation and very true. We're not sterilizing the product. And so to that point, without sterilization, the product will go bad. So there are spoilage organisms that are going to survive and that are pretty heat tolerant. And so to that point regarding milk, that's why you're going to see that go bad. When you buy milk in other countries in Europe and places like that, they have that essentially sterilized, usually come in a Tetra Pak, the little cardboard type containers. Those are typically sterilized. Now, the one difference many differences between milk and cider, but a major difference is the fact that in cider, you do have the low pH, so you have the presence of acid. And so that can help actually eliminate certain spoilage organisms from growing, but it still will, in a pasteurized product that's gone through heat pasteurization or light pasteurization, it still will eventually go bad, or it might in some cases ferment. So you might get the survival of yeast and then it continue to ferment. Not an imminent food safety concern, but it's just something that happens. Now, if you heat up a product, I couldn't tell you an exact temperature, but somewhere around past 185, it starts to become a pretty shelf stable product. Not totally shelf stable, but it starts to, because of that acid that's present. That's the same reason why in some cases where we work with folks that are producing hot sauces and barbecue sauces and ketchup and dilly beans and things like that, that's why they might only have to heat that product to 190 degrees for 5 minutes, and they can get a shelf stable product when they perform that process correctly. So even though that product, the milk or juice will go bad over time, to your point, it's not because it's we're not pasteurizing it correctly, it's because we're not sterilizing it. But yeah, you heat juice hot enough and it will become shelf stable if it's filled correctly and things like that. So I hope that answered your question.
It absolutely does. I hope to learn one thing each day, and I can quit now because I've learned something. Thank you.
Representative Underwood.
Yes, good. Thank you very much, Dr. Bolton, for your information this morning. It was quite an educational lesson. Could we move ahead with the voting on this, please? I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Representative Landry, you had your hand up. No? All right. So we do have a motion, but I would go back to Senator Black and see if that's still the motion that he wants to keep, or after the discussion we've had.
I would, thank you, Mr. Chair, for coming back to it. And the motion I made, I was struggling to make a motion that would do whatever we needed, and it was confusing. And I think you hit upon exactly what we needed to do to simplify this whole process with the suggestion you made. And I believe that I would have to ask to have my motion withdrawn. And your statements you made about using, I can't remember just all of it, I believe would have to be an amendment, or could I just move that as a motion?
Sure. What I said basically was to be labeled as cider in the state of Maine. It undergoes only UV pasteurization.
Right. And I guess if Mr. Representative Underwood would withdraw his second, I would like to withdraw my motion and make that motion.
Withdrawn.
Okay, so Karen, do you have the motion? It's amended?
Yeah, I may look to Celeste for help on this, but so right now it says a person may not sell, advertise, offer, or expose for sale any product labeled as cider, and it sounds like you we would say something like unless that product has been treated by ultraviolet light. Under subsection 2 of that law, there are accepted processing methods, and those include heat treated, treated by UV light, or pressed under a state-approved hazard and critical control plan, unless the cider bears a warning label saying that it's not pasteurized. So I'm not sure how the proposed amendment would intersect with that. Are we saying that there are not other accepted processing methods to be labeled, it can only be UV processing to be labeled as cider?
Let me ask Dr. Bolton. The third bullet, basically, she said, Karen, would you repeat that about the HACCP?
Yeah, so pressed under state-approved HACCP, unless the cider bears a warning label saying it's not pasteurized. That's current law.
Okay.
I mean, in order to be consistent with, let's say, FDA requirements, it does have to be processed under HACCP. So that would require the 5-log reduction that we talk about, which can be achieved theoretically with UV light. I will state that it's very different than FDA requirements. Now, FDA has made it clear that, as long as it is labeled, and if someone doesn't want to pasteurize and sell that product, then it can be labeled as such. But they really don't discuss, and the science really doesn't discuss aspects of this is accepted and this isn't, and this is cider and this isn't. So that's just what FDA defines. I did try to find a standard of identity of cider, and it is not defined other than slightly by the state of New York. That's internal to their state.
So Karen, does that help? So then it would sound like we would be taking out to be called cider in the state of Maine, heat pasteurization would be taken out of it.
Okay,
If
so
it was, I'm just asking you, if it was heat pasteurized, according to what I'm hearing, we could not or do not want it called cider in the state of Maine. To be called cider in the state of Maine, it either has to be cold processed through a HACCP plan approved by the state or UV pasteurized. And they would both be labeled as such, if I understood Dr. Bolton correctly. One would be labeled as UV pasteurized, and the other one would be non-pasteurized because it was processed under a HACCP plan.
Okay, so if your amendment is that a product may only be labeled as cider if that product has been, I guess what I'm having trouble with is current law provides that there are these other 3 processing. It could be heat treated, UV treated, or HACCP, but you have to label it as unpasteurized.
Right.
So if we are now saying that if it's been heat treated,
it cannot be called.
That affects kind of the 2 subsections. That's now not an accepted processing method.
It only to be called cider. It would have to be called something else in the state of Maine. If I lived in New Hampshire and processed it through heat pasteurization, I couldn't send it in the state of Maine and sell it as cider. I could send it in the state of Maine and call it something else, but I couldn't call it cider if it's been heat pasteurized.
Okay, so there's a definition, there's a duration and a temperature associated with heat pasteurization. But what if it's heat treated, and it doesn't meet the pasteurization level? Is that, can that remain under the other accepted processing methods as long as there's a warning label that it's unpasteurized? Celeste, are you following me on my dilemma? No? Okay.
I kind of am, but I feel like the original wording to 630 takes care of that. It really, I mean, it seems like what I'm hearing from Senator Timberlake is that the point at which the flavor changes is directly related to what he has requested for the parameters around that heat pasteurization. And we do in Maine allow things to be sold unpasteurized if they're labeled properly.
Right.
So really, I think, you know, excluding the shelf stable products will take care of that, because I'm feeling like anything that was heat pasteurized at the temperatures above what Senator Timberlake has referenced, that's probably the point at which things would become shelf stable. Maybe Dr. Bolton could jump in on that one, and impact the flavor.
Yeah, I don't have any data that shows that at 155 for over 155 for 5 seconds, or even 10 seconds, that the product would be shelf stable.
Okay.
So
that might not even do it.
Yeah, I mean, the data that I found from studies with using apples of different varieties and from different sources stated that that was actually closer to the 180 mark of shelf stability. Just because there are quite a few organisms that are not food safety related, but will survive that 155, causing some pretty rapid spoilage to occur.
I mean, really, accepted processing methods shouldn't even need to have any reference to heat. And we would just keep the warning label for the raw product that just says unpasteurized.
But the current law says must be heat treated by UV light, or pressed under a state approved HACCP. That's current law.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we're trying to do here is remove the heat treatment out of there to be called cider in the state of Maine. If I heat treat it, then it's no longer called cider in the state of Maine, because evidently many people believe it changes the consistency, the flavor, the taste, or whatever. So therefore, to be called cider in the state of Maine, it appears that we would only have 2 accepted methods of calling it cider.
Okay.
If it's heat pasteurized, it's now called something else. If it's heat pasteurized for less than 10 seconds, then it's considered non-pasteurized, is what I'm kind of hearing.
Okay,
Both Lance and Jason.
That's clear to me. What if it's heat treated but still not pasteurized?
Then it's non-pasteurized and have to be labeled as non-pasteurized.
Okay, but that wouldn't, okay.
So,
So that would,
if I'm assuming that, again, Dill's Orchard in New Hampshire, if I decide I was going to heat it to 155 degrees for 5 seconds, I haven't pasteurized it. I've heated it, but I haven't pasteurized it according to FDA regulations. To sell that product in Maine, I could sell that product in Maine as non-pasteurized cider. And that would be okay from what we're saying. And I see Senator Timberlake shaking his head yes too. And Representative Underwood is shaking his head because I know he'd like to get this over with. But we got to get through it. We still have a couple hands up. So Senator Underwood, did you have a question here or no? Or you still hand is up? I know we're trying to get to your point of calling the vote, but we want to make sure we got this straight.
Excellent description. Thank you.
Yes, Senator Black.
Yeah, this is, a confusing issue, and I think we've, bringing it to a head here now. And I think I just would like to say that it all comes back to, we want to define cider in the state of Maine. New York has defined cider in their state. FDA doesn't define cider, so I don't, I think it, we should be able to have our own definition of cider, and I think that the amendment you and have come up on is a good way to go. I mean, I think we've solved all the issues pretty much. And if you're going to sell cider in the state of Maine, it's got to come under those two categories. And if you want to sell something else, it's heat treated, it's got to be labeled as something else.
Representative McCray.
Yes, thank you. Am I muted? No,
I can hear you.
Okay, I'm okay. You can hear me?
Yep. Yes.
I have three. If it were to pass, as we are talking about it right now, number one, if it is pasteurized, meaning it's been 10 minutes at whatever temperature, then it cannot be sold in Maine as cider. Two.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
If it has been heat treated pasteurization, it can't be cider in Maine, according to what we're talking about right now. The second one would be if it says pasteurized cider, it has to be something other than heat pasteurization, such as UV. And thirdly, at a farm market where somebody just squeezes out apple juice and they're selling it by the gallon, then it's going to have to say unpasteurized cider. Is that right where we are? Those are kind of the three products that we could perhaps hopefully find at Walmart. That's a question to somebody, anybody.
Would you, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Senator Black.
You wouldn't be able to get the unpasteurized at Walmart, would you? You'd have to get, I mean, the department could answer that. You'd have to get that at a farm stand on site. Am I correct in saying that?
I would expect it would be squeezed locally, hopefully kept refrigerated and sold as unpasteurized cider. And if you wanted to sell it as pasteurized cider, it would be UV treated. And if you wanted to heat treat it, it would not be sold as cider. And if I heard Dr. Bolton correctly, if I used another HACCP plan that was state approved, it would still be then considered unpasteurized cider. Is that a nod, Jason? Is that what an accepted HACCP plan, the third category, would still be considered unpasteurized at that time?
Let's see. I'm trying to.
I don't know what that category is. Do you know what a third method is that would be a HACCP approved?
Let's see. So there's UV light. There's yeah. So you can use high pressure processing to pasteurize the product, which I don't know of anybody in the state that's doing that. There are companies that will, and it's specifically for high acid products. So different types of juice, fruit juice. There's companies down in Massachusetts where you put the product in a bottle and then it's exposed to very high pressures.
Okay.
So that would be another way, but still, again, you have to confirm that you're getting that 5 log reduction. So reducing bacteria by that magnitude is what's required by the regulation, by juice HACCP regulation at the FDA level.
So then I guess, Representative McCray, you were correct in what you stated. And Karen, do you have everything you think you need?
Yeah, so what I'm thinking is that I would just strike, so that section would read, a person may not sell, blah, 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 product labeled as cider, if that product, we're obviously retaining does not require refrigeration from pressing through purchase or has been heated, period. And then I would strike from the accepted processing methods in section 543A, subsection 2, any reference to heat treated.
Right.
So, you know, and what I'm hearing from Dr. Bolton is even the definition in current law of 155 or higher for more than 10 seconds doesn't always lead to pasteurization. I think that's what I heard him say. So, but that's seems to be the threshold that the state has had on the books for 20 years.
Yeah, there are many cases where that would be fine, but it is dependent on the final pH of the product. So that's kind of the caveat related to that. There are some situations where the variety of apples might have a slightly higher pH, and so that may not be enough. So that's the major thing that dictates a lot of those time and temperature parameters.
All right. The last question I have, and sorry to prolong this, is do we have a time on here? Is this going to be effective as soon as the law passes, which would be somewhere in October, September, whenever we get done out of here, 90 days? Or do we give it a year for any other folks to get everything straightened around? So that would be next year, basically in 2022, that the law, January 1st, the law would go into effect. So, and I'm just asking that. I'm okay either way, but I still see one more hand, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was thinking about what you were thinking and I lost it. I need a second. Yeah, I lost it. All right.
You're too young for that, Maggie.
Oh, I think this is what I wanted to ask. I'm sorry. So I think I feel a little bit uncomfortable, and I think a bit of it is because I've been trying to research another question that I have concurrently, but I just would like I'd like Director Poulin to kind of summarize what we are changing and why that's okay if we've had heat treated in there. And yeah, I'm just feeling a little uncomfortable about all the, because of my own lack of background knowledge on this, and want a clear statement of what's going to be changed and why that would be okay for folks in Maine based on their practices.
My understanding is what we are changing is disallowing an apple juice product that has been heat treated above a certain threshold from being defined as cider. I mean, that to me seems to be the gist of what we're trying to accomplish. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be where we're at right now.
Okay, thank you. Karen, could you read out what the amendment is again?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to make folks do this, but
Nope, that's okay, because the way that I would have drafted it is there would be no threshold in terms of heating. Any heating would, you know, there just instantly make that product not authorized to be labeled as cider.
okay. And my question for Representative Timberlake is that okay for your community? I'm just trying to get a sense of that, if that's a practice folks use and they wouldn't be able to label their product as cider. I'm trying to get clear on that.
Senator Timberlake, did you hear that question?
I think so. I was putting on my mask, getting ready to walk in the State House. But what and thank you, Representative O'Neill. I think the fact is that nobody in Maine heat treats, and the HACCP plan is a federal plan. So I think if you do exactly what you're doing, every farmer in the state of Maine will thank you. I can't see a reason why you'd have to put it off, because the process, everybody is ability to move it forward now. And 180 days is enough.
Does that answer your question, Representative O'Neill?
Thank you, everybody. Yes.
Are there anything else? Representative McCray?
Yeah, yes, I hate to defend the big producers, but is that going to be time enough for them to adjust to this and to be fair at them without having them take a, I'm all for exactly where we're going, but are we putting the big producers and the big marketers at a great financial loss by this, or is 6 months going to be enough time?
I would assume that only changes what they put on their label. They have to change the label. Nothing else for them changes unless they decide to stay in the cider market and go to UV.
Okay, great. I'm good. I'm in favor of the bill. Thank you.
Representative Osher.
Thank you, Chair Dill. What is it that these processors would be calling the heat-treated pasteurized process, the heat-treated products, if they're not called cider?
That's up to them.
So we, as a state that's saying what is cider, don't have a definition of something that isn't cider. Just
right. We just have a definition of cider.
Almost cider.
Oh. Any other questions? All right, Linda, would you please call the roll?
Actually, I don't even think we have a motion, do we? I mean, you've been talking about your amendment, but I don't think anyone actually moved it.
That's true. I don't think he actually did. Senator Black?
Yes, I would like to move your motion that you made. I can't remember just what it was.
What Karen has.
Yeah, what Karen has now. It's been so long, but a definition of what cider was without heating it. I mean, Senator Dill gave a good. Do you have it in front of you, Karen?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if it's heated, it's not cider.
Yeah.
If it's heat treated, it's not cider. That's the amendment.
Right.
So you're ought to pass as amended.
Yes, ought to pass as amended.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Representative Underwood. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Cheryl, please call the roll.
Yes, I will. LD 630, an act to prohibit shelf-stable products from being sold as cider and to amend the definition for those products that are heated. Ought to pass as amended. Senator James Dill.
Yes.
Senator James Dill. Yes. Senator Russell Black.
Yes.
Senator Russell Black. Yes. Senator Chloe Maxman.
Yes.
Senator Chloe Maxman. Yes. Representative Margaret O'Neill.
Yes.
Representative Margaret O'Neill. Yes. Representative Randall Hall.
Yes.
Representative Randall Hall. Yes. Representative Lori Osher.
Yes.
Representative Lori Osher. Yes. Representative Tom Schofield. Absent. Representative Joseph Underwood.
Yes.
Representative Joseph Underwood. Yes. Representative Scott Landry.
Yes.
Representative Scott Landry. Yes. Representative Bill Pluker.
Yes.
Representative Bill Pluker. Yes. Representative Jeffrey Gifford.
Yes.
Representative Jeffrey Gifford. Yes. Representative David McCray.
Yes.
Representative David McCray. Yes. Representative Susan Bernard. Absent. 11 yes, 2 absent.
So on the issue of LD 630, an act to prohibit shelf-stable products from being sold as cider and to amend the definition for those products that are heated, it ought to pass as amended. 11 in favor, 2 absent. And we will look for this for language review for the final and move forward. Thank you. And I will close the work session on LD 630. Open up the work session on LD 63.
may I proceed, Senator Dill?
Absolutely.
So this is an act regarding the Northeastern Interstate Forest Fire Protection Compact, the NFFPC. The current Northeast Compact language provides liability protection for incidents within the compact area. The compact area includes all the New England states, New York, the Canadian provinces of Quebec, Newfoundland, and Labrador, and the Maritimes. So this bill proposes to extend that liability protection for the state and for firefighters who travel to fight wildfires or other emergencies out of the NFFC compact. So, but if the bill would extend it to other compact areas across the country. So we heard that there are currently 8 forest fire compacts covering most of the United States and Canada, representing 43 states, and most of Canada except for 1 province and 1 territory. So there was only testimony in favor from the Maine Forest Service and Maine Forest Products Council. We did hear from the Forest Service. They did put, it was submitted as emergency legislation, and they would support removing that if the committee sees fit. So other than that, Representative Underwood had some questions about the commercial forestry excise tax. I did include a little paragraph on that, on the bill analysis, but I will leave it at that for now. And I do believe I saw Mr. Hamilton from Maine Forest Service in the attendees, if you have any questions for him.
Okay, Representative Pluker.
In the effort to move us right along, I move on to pass.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Representative Landry. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Sharon.
The only issue I would raise is if anyone foresees a problem that this would not get a 2/3 majority vote in the chambers, it does have an emergency preamble, so it requires that. And as I just said, that the department doesn't feel the need for the emergency preamble. But if you want to just vote it straight out to pass, that's fine too. But an amendment
Just
would
as soon as I get done saying yes.
Representative Pluker, what do you want to do? You want to strip it off or leave it there?
My feeling is that we were going to probably be in consensus here in committee, and it'll be in consensus there, and I can strip it on the House floor if we need to.
Okay.
Absolutely. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Cheryl, please call the roll.
LD 63, an act regarding the Northeastern Interstate Forest Fire Protection Compact, ought to pass. Senator James Dill.
Yes.
Senator James Dill, yes. Senator Russell Black.
Yes.
Senator Russell Black, yes. Senator Chloe Maxman.
Yes.
Senator Chloe Maxman, yes. Representative Margaret O'Neill.
Yes.
Representative Margaret O'Neill, yes. Representative Randall Hall.
Yes.
Representative Randall Hall, yes. Representative Lori Osher.
Yes.
Representative Lori Osher, yes. Representative Thomas Schofield, absent. Representative Joseph Underwood.
Yes.
Representative Joseph Underwood, yes. Representative Scott Landry.
Yes.
Representative Scott Landry, yes. Representative Bill Pluker.
Yes.
Representative Bill Pluker, yes. Representative Jeffrey Gifford.
Yes.
Representative Jeffrey Gifford, yes. Representative David McCray.
Yes.
Representative David McCray, yes. Representative Susan Bernard, absent. 11 to 2, 2 absent.
Okay, on the issue, LD 63, an act regarding the Northeastern Interstate Forest Fire Protection Compact ought to pass. 11-02. It passes. And I'll close the work session on LD 63. And we'll open up the work session on LD 95. Propose an amendment to the Constitution of Maine to establish a right to food.
So this was tabled. We need to take it off the table.
Okay, can I have a motion to take it off the table? Representative Landry, is there a second? Stays on the table. Representative Osher,
I'll take it off the
all in
table.
favor, just raise your hand, please. Everyone that I can see seems to have their hand up. Very good. It's off the table. Go ahead, Karen.
So the way the committee left it last time, some committee members wanted to hear from the Attorney General how including the phrase save and exchange seeds in the constitutional resolution regarding the right to food might impact seed potatoes and other certified seed. And more specifically, does the language in the CR completely exclude commercial production, since the CR refers to individuals having the rights articulated in LD 95. So I did reach out to the Attorney General's office and heard back from an assistant AG who said that his view is that the language of the CR suggests there is an intent to limit the right to save and exchange seeds for individuals' own nourishment, sustenance, bodily health, and well-being. So he pointed to that phrase in particular. It's for your own nourishment, sustenance, bodily health, and well-being, as opposed to, for example, the planting of seeds intended for sale. However, with this said, the resolution language does not expressly address the use of seeds for product intended for sale, and is at least not without some ambiguity. And he couldn't say for certain how the courts would interpret that language.
Did they say anything about, though, did seeds include seed potato, certified seeds, etc.? Did I miss you saying that?
Yeah, that's how I posed the question. I specifically used certified seed potatoes. So he knew what the concern was.
But I didn't necessarily hear an answer that either says yes or no that certified seeds and seed potatoes are considered seeds. Did he? I mean, maybe I just missed it when you read it, but.
Well, I think what he said is that the language suggests that there is an intent to limit the right to save and exchange seeds for individual own use or nourishment, sustenance, bodily health, and well-being, as opposed to seed intended for sale.
So then what I guess I'm hearing you say, if I bought seed potato and planted it this year because it's certified seed for insect and disease, mostly disease reduction, I plant that, then technically next year I could save that potato seed, and then the following year I could plant it for my own use. I couldn't sell it, but I could plant it for my own use. Would be one way of interpreting what he said, that as an individual I can save that for my own use.
That's how I understood it as well.
Okay. Which I personally would think would undermine seed certification, whether it be potato seed or broccoli seed or whatever. Plus the whole hybrid issue comes into play there anyway, but that's another issue. Okay. Any other questions for Karen? Is there anybody? Yes, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so just to go through this letter, and I'm sorry if it's in our email and I didn't get it, but I'm hearing, I'm sorry, I'm gathering my bearings a bit here. So they were saying, like a lawyer would, that, there could be some ambiguity. I think that's a pretty normal answer to say when you're talking about a constitutional amendment. You don't want to say absolutely not. There's no chance for anything to happen. But their letter seems to go in the direction of saying it's limited to individuals because it uses the word individual, and it also has the purpose kind of language of what it says, which is, I think, nourishment, sustenance, bodily health, and well-being. But it says there may be a chance of it interpreting the other way, but the thrust of it is that the purpose is clear.
Yeah, I guess, how he phrased it was the CR suggests an intent. And he actually pointed more to the phrase own nourishment, sustenance, bodily health, and well-being. That was kind of what he pointed to more, rather than the use of the word individual. Individual underscores that, but that was kind of his reasoning or way of thinking. Is that phrase
It's the same
really?
way. They go together. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're not seeing a right to commercially sell written into it. So I think both of those things together.
Other questions from Karen? Is there anyone else you want to hear from? I would entertain a motion. Representative Fluker.
I think Senator Hickman is on the line. If he wanted to give us 2 cents, that'd be great.
Oh, okay. Would you bring in Senator Hickman? There he is.
Hello. If you give me 1 second, I am abruptly here. Oh, mercy. Give me 1 second to figure out my technical difficulties.
Before we hear from Representative Hickman, I don't know if Representative Fockingham is in the attendees, but he did have an amendment for the committee to consider, so we can circle back to that later.
Yes, he is in the, so would you let in Representative Fockingham also, please?
Can you guys hear me? Okay, yes. I'm Craig Hickman. Hello, good morning, Senator Dill, Representative O'Neill. I'm Craig Hickman. I represent Senate District 14, which includes 11 towns in Kennebec County. And I just wanted to see if you received the law clinic analysis on the seeds and the constitutional resolution that was submitted to the chairs last night, that I didn't actually write, but I know that a set of lawyers who look at right to food issues basically did an investigation of our statutes and presented an opinion for you as well on what is or is not going to necessarily be a problem with the language of saving exchange seeds in the resolution. Do you guys have that?
Yes.
Okay.
I saw it yesterday. I went through it.
Yeah, I just that's the only reason why I asked to be here, because I know the law clinic couldn't. They had to go back to class at 10:30. And so I didn't know if anyone had any questions about that document, but I don't have anything to say other than that I believe it's a pretty clear analysis that saving and exchanging seeds doesn't mess up the certified seed potato program, because certified seed potatoes are actually not seeds as defined in statute.
Karen.
I just forwarded the letter to the rest of the committee. It looks like just the chairs received it.
Okay. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Representative Hickman, for bringing that up. I did read through the analysis, and I mean, going into this, I thought the analysis was pretty straightforward, but their analysis confirmed what I think the AG said, but more cautiously phrased than what this says, because that's the AD's job, is to issue spot. So I think it's really saying pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, it provides a very good overview of the ways in which the words in the constitutional amendment are actually already used or not used in statute, and what they clearly mean by plain readings. And I just think that words are terribly important, And the question that came up had to do with whether or not this right as drafted would interfere somehow with any certified seed program. And the law says that seeds are for sale. That's how they're defined in the law in Title VII. And so since the constitutional amendment doesn't talk about seeds being for sale, it's very clear that the certified seed program would not be affected if this constitutional amendment goes into effect.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Thank you for articulating that.
No problem. That's all.
Representative Falkingham, did you have an amendment or something you wanted to say?
No, I didn't have an amendment, and I don't have anything to add other than the opinion that came from the law clinic, and I hope everybody had a chance to read it. I think it did a pretty good job of confirming that there's no way to use potato seeds for commercial use. That was the final outcome of that. In the final line, it says, the constitutional resolution does not include a right to commercially produce or sell seeds regardless of certification. So that was basically the conclusion that came out of that. And that's all I had to add.
Okay. Karen?
So I guess back at the end of March, I'm a little confused. At one point, Representative Falkingham, I guess it was at the last work session, talked about amending the language in the CR to include in line 6 of the bill after unalienable right to, and add the word food, comma, including the right to, and then continue on.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're still interested in adding that phrase.
Okay.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, I apologize if that's what the question was, because the last work session, that amendment was already proposed, and I thought that was the motion that you were still going by, but that's the amendment that I would want to see put forth. Again, I guess it was that motion was made and a vote was conversation was started, and that's when the potato seed conversation came up, and then you guys rather went to get some more information on that and pushed it out to another work session. But yeah, that's still the amendment that I want to see, the one that does include the right to food in the amendment. So I guess if it's backed up that far, then I'd like to see it as amended, yes.
Okay, I'm glad I clarified. Representative O'Neill made the motion, Representative Schofield seconded it. So I guess I would ask Representative O'Neill if that's her recollection and if she's fine with that.
I believe so. So you're saying the language of right to food is in that amendment, Representative Falkingham? I'm just trying to remember. I'm going through my files.
It was the amendment that I proposed to you guys at the first work session, the one that says it just added in that sentence, natural inherent right to food.
Okay.
So Representative O'Neill, if you look at line 6 of the bill, after the first two words, right to, it would add food, comma, including the right to.
Okay. So it adds food, comma, including the right to save seeds. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Yes, that's my motion and that works.
Yeah, I apologize for my confusion. It was the motion that I was already put forth last time. So
that's perfect. No, I'm glad we're clear. Thank you.
Any other discussion? I would offer up one minor friendly amendment if it's acceptable, and then I could support it, that after the word seed, that we say accept certified seed. And I'm okay with that because I think that would clarify any issue around certified seed potatoes, any other certified seeds. That for whatever reason, somebody went to the trouble of getting it certified. So that would be my suggestion, that I would support it. Representative O'Neill.
that that really goes in the face of the intent and the culture. I think what the memo is clear that it's not going to interfere with the certified seed program, and it's clear that it's only talking about personal use. And something I want to add is that I think from a drafting sense for constitutional amendments, it doesn't make sense to put specific things like that into a constitution. It just doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel like it belongs there. And I think that the language as it's written is clear.
Okay. Representative Pluker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, because I think that what we're doing is we're preserving the right to save seed. So if I were to purchase certified seed, whether that be a potato or certified seed from some other source, and then wanted to save the seed for my own personal use, I think that is something we're trying to save here with this amendment, or protect with this amendment. And I think excluding my personal right, or any person's personal right to save their own seed that might have come from a certified source, I don't think that makes sense with the intent of the amendment. Thank you.
Other discussion? Seeing no further, yes, Representative Falkingham.
So there are currently already laws surrounding patents, patent infringement, and things of that nature. So when you start getting into patented things, even patented seeds, there are already laws that cover that sort of thing. So I think that when this amendment says no theft or property rights are abused, that's where that's covered in the constitutional amendment.
Okay. Other discussion? Seeing none. Cheryl, please call the roll.
Senator Dill?
Yes.
Senator Dill. So I think to sort of have a clean process, because the person who seconded the motion back at the end of March is not in attendance, if Representative O'Neill would just withdraw it, and then a new motion would be made with, adding, assuming that someone would move that motion, food, including the right to, in line 6. Because I'm not 100% certain that Representative Schofield would, that was part of the motion at that time. Just for clear process.
All right, so you're withdrawing your motion, Representative O'Neill, and
That
you,
works for me.
yeah, okay, and you're gonna make a new motion?
Exactly, yes. I'm withdrawing my motion and making a new motion not to pass as amended, including the right to food, including, as Karen articulated.
Is there a second to that? Senator Maxman.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Cheryl, call the roll.
LD 95 ought to pass as amended. Senator James Dill.
Yes.
Senator James Dill, yes. Senator Russell Black.
Yes.
Senator Russell Black, yes. Senator Chloe Maxman.
Yes.
Senator Chloe Maxman, yes. Representative Margaret O'Neill.
Yes.
Representative Margaret O'Neill, yes. Representative Randall Hall.
Yes.
Representative Randall Hall, yes. Representative Lori Osher.
Yes.
Representative Lori Osher, yes. Representative Thomas Schofield, absent. Representative Joseph Underwood.
Yes.
Representative Joseph Underwood, yes. Representative Scott Landry.
Yes.
Representative Scott Landry, yes. Representative Bill Pluker.
Yes.
Representative Bill Pluker, yes. Representative Jeffrey Gifford.
Yes.
Representative Jeffrey Gifford, yes. Representative David McCray.
Yes.
Representative David McCray, yes. Representative Susan Bernard, absent. 11 yes, 2 absent.
On LD 95, resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of Maine to establish a right to food, 1102, ought to pass as amended. I will close the work session on LD 95 and open up the work session on LD 264, an act to prohibit aerial application of PFAS and PFOS substances. And we'll go to Karen.
So this bill proposes to prohibit aerial application of a pesticide unless the Board of Pesticides Control has determined that the pesticide has been analyzed by a third-party entity not associated with the manufacturer of the pesticide, who has determined that PFAS substances are not part of the formulation of the pesticide. And it also, if PFAS substances are part of the formulation, it prohibits the aerial application of those as well. So we heard from the department, who testified neither for nor against, that this bill stemmed, and we heard from the sponsor as well, that this bill stemmed from the detection of PFAS in a pesticide utilized for mosquito control in Massachusetts. And the underlying pesticide formulation did not contain PFAS or PFOS, nor did the container that it was packaged in. However, because the container underwent fluorination treatment by a third party to prevent container degradation, that process appeared to be the source of the PFAS compounds found sampled in pesticide products. So we heard from the department that Board of Pesticide Control staff are currently actively engaged in this broad topic with colleagues in other state pesticide programs, as well as US EPA Region 1, and they're already briefing the board on developments at its monthly meetings. Director McBrady did say that PFAS detection in pesticide formulations is a whole new area of consideration, investigation, and response beyond what the current issues that the department is already navigating with related to PFAS impacted farms. So the department did suggest turning this act into a resolve rather than assigning a specific action at this time to test all aerial pesticides. And the resolve would direct the Board of Pesticides Control to continue information gathering and to develop a prioritized response plan that the department or the board would report back to this committee in the second regular session of the 130th legislature. And I seem to recall that Representative Pluka was open to that idea of turning the act into a resolve. There were a number of information requests. There was a request made of the Board of Pesticides Control to Representative Pluker asked for the amount of acres that's sprayed aerially with a breakdown of herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides, and also wanted to hear about aerial application for a deltacide to control mosquitoes, and was there a similar aerial application for ticks? And Director Patterson did send us some information. I believe it was yesterday by email. Hopefully you all have that. And I see her there. There she is in the Hollywood Squares. So she's here to speak to that. There was also a question posed to Patrick Strouk of Maine Forest Products Council. Was also Representative Pluker, who asked if they had any data on storage of pesticides. And then there was a question posed of Karen Reardon of Responsible Industry for Sound Environment. The question was of their products, does she have any statistics of what products are used in Maine, and are they packaged in fluorinated products? So I'll leave it there for now.
Are there any questions for Karen? All right, seeing none. Welcome this morning, Director Patterson. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, certainly. Good morning. My name is Megan Patterson. I'm the Director of the Board of Pesticides Control.
A couple quick things that come to mind, and I know you testified that I think this whole PFAS thing is really starting to come to light, mainly because of what happened with the mosquito issue. And so the first question that it raises in my mind, if I'm a major applicator and I go out and I buy a product this year, and it's treated with a fluorinated sealant on the container, and I don't know who tests it, but a third party tests it and says it's okay. That's the first kind of, yep, okay. But if I save a couple of those containers until next year, then I just go and use them because I say last year it was tested, it was fine. Do you know if these products leach out more over time? Is it a fairly fast thing? And I guess the other question to you is, how do we get at this? I mean, do you have to test every time you're going to pour a pesticide into your spray tank if it's going to be an aerial application? You know, you test each one before you pour it into the tank, if we pass this.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not sure I can speak to specifically, well, more or less it'll apply to this bill, I suppose. So I can speak in some generalities about what EPA has found thus far, and some of the uncertainties as well. And certainly there are a lot of uncertainties around, that's one thing that is certain, there are a lot of uncertainties around this. So EPA, in their preliminary findings with these containers, and now they've only tested containers for a handful of products, and I think most of those were either addressed in the testimony from the department or have more recently come to light, and EPA is in the process of testing them. They are speculating to some degree that time and also temperature could impact the amount of PFAS that ultimately does leach from the container or move from the container itself, the fluorinated container, into the formulation. So certainly that could have an impact, although to some degree that's unclear. So I know that EPA has initiated a study where they're going to be looking at that timeline and how much PFAS is liberated from the container. So this fluorination process, the reason it's happening, or the reason any sort of treatment of these HDP containers happens, and sorry, I'm going to close my blind. It's actually very, very bright. So just a minute. Southern sun is wonderful, but it's a little bit intense. Part of the reason they do this is because of a DOT requirement for HDPE containers and any other plastic containers to have a durability of 2 years. And so that DOT requirement was adopted by EPA directly into their CFR. And so that's the justification for why someone is interested, why a company is interested in improving the durability of these containers. Now, fluorination isn't the only game in town. They could do another type of treatment. Other countries do other types of treatments, and I think that's a consideration that's on the table at the moment. With regard to what we would need to do as a result of this bill, if it came to fluorination, I can tell you what's happening currently with the Clark mosquito control product, Anvil 1010, what they being EPA and Clark, have chosen to do nationwide because of this testing. And what they've found is to have Clark take back the product, and ultimately it will have to be destroyed. And then any product going forward is packaged, or will be packaged, including for this season, in steel containers. And those are, I believe, fully steel containers. I don't believe they have plastic lids on them, which has become a question with another product where PFAS was detected. So I guess that's the immediate plan. The other part of this is that, and I think some people had asked about, or you had asked about, but other people have asked about too, what about product that's on hand? So Clark has elected to replace the existing product. So they've actually asked for individuals to no longer use it. EPA has asked for individuals to no longer use it if they have it on hand, and Clark will replace it 1-to-1. So that answers just for that specific product, but I guess that's the intent. Of course, that's all organized at the federal level, as opposed to a state trying to organize it. That's part of the rub here, I think, when we try to figure out how to proceed is us doing this on our own. It might be, it's easier to do things, I guess, organized at the federal level for this kind of large scale national corporations needing to take back product. But that's just a consideration for you, for all of you, I guess.
Do you know, well, I guess the question actually is, here in the state of Maine, of course, we're not really doing any mosquito control. So, and I know your response to when someone asked about aerial application for ticks, that's not the case either. So we basically have herbicides by air. Correct. And I think we might have some insecticides on broccoli, perhaps by air.
Yeah, so that should be in the email that I sent you. So basically, those two reports I provided you, commercial applicators are required by law to provide an end of year use summary report to the Board of Pesticides Control. You may be familiar with this. This is something, basically it sits in a paper format. So sorry, no props, but that's what you received in your email. Sorry, I slip up. But basically these are exactly what those commercial applicators have reported to us. So they've said for 2019, and I gave you 2019 because that's the year that I had application records for both of these companies. There are basically two aerial application companies doing work currently in Maine. There are 3 other license holders that have the aerial application certification, but none of those companies actually have their own airplanes. They would only subcontract or work with aerial applicators. And an aerial applicator would have to be licensed in Maine to be able to do this work. So I'm confident that this is the only commercial aerial application work that is done in Maine. And recently, private applicators also had to, or have now have to have also a certification for aerial application, even if they want to use drones on their own farms to do aerial application. That's something that went into rule 2 years ago now. And that's because of a change in federal law that now requires that additional certification. So while we wouldn't have the report on what they were choosing to do on their farms, they would at least have to have that additional certification area, and we haven't had anybody seek that yet. So, so I guess that's just to give you a sense. I do think this is a fairly comprehensive record of, if not entirely comprehensive record of at least everything that is lawfully done in Maine.
So those products that are sprayed by Maine in air, are they being tested for PFAS?
Not yet. So I guess that would be a matter of, well, to some degree, the outcome of this bill. I do know that some of the manufacturers are looking at, or the product sales folks are looking at the specific products they intend to use. So I know that question's being asked with the thought that, this bill could proceed, and if it did, that they would need to be prepared with that information prior to the start of the season potentially. So.
All right, great. Thank you. Are there other questions for Director Patterson? Yes, Representative Underwood.
Are drones considered as part of this bill also? They wanted to spray by drones?
Yes, I would think so. So that's a bit of an assumption on my part. The bill doesn't define them otherwise, but for the Board of Pesticides Control, they did decide, now I believe it was almost 3 years ago, that aerial application does in fact include drone application. So all drones would be regulated as aerial application in the state of Maine.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Megan.
Sure.
Are there anyone want to make a motion? Representative Fluker. Yep.
I'd like to just discuss the issue slightly. It's, at the time when I put this bill together, it was not clear that the PFAS was coming from the HDPE containers that it was being distributed and manufactured in. So I think that any bill we're moving forward with needs to take into account those HDPE containers as they seem to be the very clear source of problem here. So that's one aspect of a motion that I would make, is that we're going to need to make that sort of amendment in the bill. The other part of the conversation, which is, I think, we still need to look at, is that there are a lot of inert ingredients in these herbicides and pesticides, and some of them are surfactants, and so a surfactant is a material that in some cases is part of the formulation of a pesticide. In other situations, it's something that you add to the pesticide or herbicide. It can help with the flow of the pesticide. It can help with the way the pesticide or herbicide sticks to the plant. And so many of these pesticides or herbicides, I appreciate Megan or Ms. Patterson sending over Director Patterson sending over the list yesterday, so I had a chance to kind of go through them. So some of those, or at least one that I have found, does have a surfactant in the formulation. So, and many of the surfactants do have their fluorinated surfactants, and I do not know what surfactants are incorporated in the herbicides that we're looking at. It's not included in the labeling. And this is just all goes back to the problem that we're looking at, is that we don't quite know what is in these formulations. And if people are using fluorinated surfactants, so not to go too deep into the chemistry here, but the F of the PFAS refers to a fluorine atom. And when you put fluorine atoms into these chains with carbon, they kind of end up in this world of PFAS chemicals, which numbers in the hundreds and perhaps thousands. We're really only concerned with about 6 that are really clear as being that a lot of, depending on who you talk to, 6 that are very clearly being regulated on the state level at this point. So all this to go to say there's a lot of uncertainty here. And where do we as a committee need to fall on this? The reason I've singled out aerial application in this case is because just as we were looking at some of the email that was sent over from Board of Pesticide Control, rough numbers as I'm looking at it, it's maybe 40,000 acres are being sprayed or were sprayed in 2019. And that's why I'm really focusing on aerial application, because there is a cumulative comprehensive effect over the long term. We did hear testimony, I believe, from Ms. Treat, that the fish in northern Maine, where there is not much or almost no inhabitation, or inhabitants, where we are finding PFAS in those fish. How is that getting there? We don't know the answer. So faced with this uncertainty, knowing that there is fluorine being used in surfactants, knowing that there is fluorine potentially being used in the manufacture of the bottles and the barrels for storage, I totally agree with the department's take that they need a chance to continue this work, and the EPA is also continuing this work. We need to hear back from them, but I also feel like that we need to take we need to make certain choices now as a committee to protect us going forward. So what I'm looking to do is amend the bill so that it takes into account the containers, amend the bill so it takes into account these surfactants that are either added or part of the formulation of the pesticides, and get a more comprehensive bill reported back to us from the Board of Pesticide Control. Or maybe they wouldn't report the bill back, but they would report findings back to us that we could take action on in 2022. I'm open to questions and comments from anybody. Thank you.
So Representative Pluka, did that lead you to the thoughts of a carryover on this, to hear back from the department, or pass a bill in some fashion and then ask them to come back with more findings and then do whatever we can do at that point in time?
Yes, I don't need to make a motion until we've had some conversation, but I would recommend a motion to OTPA, ought to pass as amended, that incorporates the containers, incorporates surfactants, and incorporates some sort of study of the herbicides and pesticides that are being sprayed aerially that could be reported back to us so that we could take further action in 2022. So taking the information we have now, providing some level of safety, with the idea that we're going to take further action in years to come.
Okay. Representative McCray.
Yes. This thing very quickly get into the weeds. And it seems to me that maybe with PFAS and PFOS being, we fear, such a tremendously bad thing in the environment, that it might be just the easiest thing that there shall be no aerial spray of chemicals containing PFAS, PFOS. That takes care of chemicals, that takes care of containers, that takes care of surfactants, takes care of everything. If you're spraying it, it can't have PFAS, PFOS. Exclamation point, period.
Representative Hall.
Yes, thank you, Senator Dill. I understand what Representative McCray is saying, but if you go back to what Director Patterson said, some of these substances, they're not even sure if they have PFAS or PFOS in them because they haven't been tested for it yet. So I don't know I guess what I'm hearing from Representative Pluker and whatnot, and going through my notes on a public hearing, is maybe a possibility. We do need to study this more, and I don't know if we're ready to actually draw up a bill and say this is the law, but we don't know what the law is. And maybe we need to back up just a little bit, pull the reins in and say, let's have a study on this and come back in February of 2022 and actually get it right. I don't know. That's just what I'm hearing.
Okay. Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm inclined to support Rep. Pluker's motion, and part of why I'm thinking that way is I think the benefit of this approach is it puts it on the chemical makers and the people that have the ability to do this to give us that information instead of saying to BPC, you go figure it out, somehow. I think it really is the responsibility of these companies to protect people and get that information and provide it to people. So that's the benefit that I see of passing this now, and then including the portion that Representative Pluker articulated about further review.
Representative Underwood.
I move we table this until 2022 in order to achieve a better knowledge structure on regarding spraying, and if there is really a problem with it, and if we could table this until 2022, it would be appreciated.
Yes, Karen.
You can't do that unless you carry it over.
Right.
And I'm sure the chairs know this. I don't know if everyone knows this, but the presiding officers have sort of set a limit on the number of carryovers each committee can have. It's 10% of the bills in the special session. So we actually get penalized for reporting out 15 bills or so in the regular session. So right now we've already carried over 2. So we have about 3 more, 4 maybe. But anyway, just to be mindful of that.
Okay.
Another question, then I'll withdraw the tabling motion and move ought not to pass. Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor ought not to pass. Is there a second?
No, I'm not seconding. I had a point of order.
What's the point of order?
Did you recognize Representative Underwood before he spoke?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
He still had the floor. He
Thank
had been speaking. Is there a second? All right, the motion dies at the moment for lack of a second. I would go on back to Megan Patterson. Megan, we don't have a motion yet, but we're probably getting there someplace. From what you've heard, especially with what Representative Pluker may have put forward, what do you see as doable here? Are the manufacturers going to be looking at this? I would hope that they would be. Can the board look at it and report back to us if we decided to carry this over or do something with this? And I'm not sure. I thought I heard some number of acres thrown out too, and I'm not sure how much acreage was, not that it truly matters, but some acreage has been batted around about how much was sprayed last in your report, but that's not as crucial. But at least could you comment on the other portions that Representative Fluker has kind of presented?
Sure. Yeah. So EPA is continuing to look at this. I mean, states have. We just had a public meeting of some joint working committees of basically state lead agencies that regulate pesticides. We're meeting with EPA this week. So the pressure is on for EPA to continue looking at this. We're definitely maintaining that focus and helping them to do so as well. So no doubt about that, they're going to keep looking at it. When it comes to the manufacturers, at this point, EPA has not given any, well, I don't know. It's actually, I guess they've encouraged companies to look at their formulations, and if they know that PFAS are moving from the containers into the formulation, then it would be adulteration, and they're encouraging companies to look at that and report it. I think, that sounds weak, but I think there are teeth to that, just as there are in the state of Maine, when it comes to materials coming from that are not a part of the reported formulation, that it is considered adulteration. So the board could take action on that and could prohibit sale of those products in the state, regardless of what happens here today. And then with regard to your other questions, surfactants, I guess there is one note there. So unless it's already a part of the formulation, if it's a surfactant that's added after the fact, so I think, if you've heard sort of bantered about 20 to 30% of agricultural containers, those aren't just pesticides. Those are talking about fertilizers, and those are also talking about surfactant products. The BPC doesn't have any authority over surfactants that are not a part of the formulation, and it doesn't have authority over those pesticides or the fertilizers that would be also possibly in the fluorinated containers. So I realize fertilizers aren't a part of this conversation, but just to be clear, when they're talking about ag containers that are fluorinated, they're not just talking about pesticides, and we don't have authority over all of those containers. So you could include surfactants here, but I guess I do wonder where we would derive that authority to take action on those products. And then your last, are those all your questions? And then you had a question about acreage?
No, that's pretty much it. The only thing I guess I would add to that, though, is what capability does the board have of testing? If EPA is not testing, we pass this bill, it seems like, okay, it's listening to Representative Fluker, and I understand where it's coming from. So then the problem's now in state. What can you do to follow up?
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes down to, from your earlier question that you had asked about, is it going to take tank mixing, checking the samples of the tank mix every single time they apply the product? I think not. I think we would take representative samples of the materials in advance of application, if in fact we needed to do something here. For us, because we do not have a lab, which is, I will share, that is a gripe of mine. So if you ever find it in your power to provide us with the resources to be able to have a laboratory that could do analysis in state, that would be wonderful. But as it is currently, we have to send all of our environmental sampling to other out-of-state laboratories. And so we're currently in the process of identifying labs that could do that work for us to figure out, what their capacity is, how many PFAS substances they actually test for, which is, of course, a question for a lot of folks. But we would have to send those samples out of state if we wanted to do something as the BPC. I mean, otherwise, it's a matter of staying in touch with EPA, making sure we're aware of what their research is, and moving forward with whatever, on whatever information they provide us in whatever way we can. So I definitely don't want you to think that we're not interested in moving forward with this. This is certainly a major concern that there's potentially adulteration in these materials. And I do think, there's a little bit of question too about the surfactants and whether or not those have to be, how that information is divulged. It's a part of the confidential statement of formula. And so that information is shared with EPA. That's one of my questions too, is how we would have that conveyed to us if we needed that and wanted it directly from EPA, what that process would look like. I understand they also have to divulge that they fluorinate the containers. So that's a part of that sharing information with EPA when they register the product, that they have to demonstrate that the container is sufficiently solid, that it meets the requirements of DOT that EPA has directly adopted into their federal standard. So that information is divulged to EPA as well at the time of registration. So there may be a possibility of getting that information from them as well. So for us, it may look more like an act of moving paperwork and identifying resources of information and how to obtain those. But we certainly could do testing as well. That's not out of the question. It's just a little bit more limited for us.
Okay, thank you. Senator Black.
My question is, can we, I'm a little confused on what Representative Pluker what recommendation was. If he could go over that one more time for me, it would be helpful. And then I might have a follow-up question, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Representative Pluker.
Should I put it in the form of a motion so we're clear about what we're talking about, or is that not appropriate at this point?
I can if you want. I mean, we still have to discuss it, so.
Okay. I guess I'm not ready to do that until I ask Megan Patterson a question.
Sure.
Okay. Director Patterson, you mentioned not be able to regulate the surfactants if they're added. So do people report what was in their tank mix?
They do, but they're not obligated to provide us with surfactant information if it's not a part of the formulation. Like if it's not, I mean,
yeah.
If for example, it's glyphosate that has a surfactant added to it in the container itself, and that's how it's sold, then that's an assumption that that's a part of that. We could look at the label, we'd know that there was a surfactant in the formulation. With regard to surfactants that are purchased after the fact, just as you mentioned, anti-foaming agents, sticking agents, spreaders, no, they're not obligated to provide us with that information.
Interesting. Okay, and I had a follow-up. Oh, I had a question, because most of the acres that are sprayed with the herbicides from the state of Maine are done from New Hampshire. Do they create I didn't know if they do their tank mix in New Hampshire and then fly it over, or if they do their tank mix here in the state of Maine and apply in the state of Maine.
So I do believe all of that is done in Maine, but I would have to ask so it's actually a product supplier. So they're not doing, the company that does that work, that does the actual aerial application, much of that is pre-mixed for them and then used in the field, right? So it's not something that they're doing before they come into the state. So they're actually purchasing it as a mixed material, and then they're doing any additional mixing, any additional adding of active ingredients actually in the field at the batching. They call it a batching site. So I guess, I'm sorry, I'm not sure where the question was going.
I was just thinking about whether or not we have the power to regulate what happens in New Hampshire. But what you're saying is a certain amount of mixing is happening before it gets to Maine, and then additional mixing is happening in the state of Maine.
Yeah, and we would still have the authority to look at whatever is in their batch tank. I mean, that's not anything that comes into this. Basically, anytime you use a pesticide, including actually if you choose to use antimicrobial dish soap, technically we have authority over that. So I don't think that's a question of, it's a question of whether or not we'd have the ability to look at what's in the tank. I think for me, one of the questions that would raise more so is that the pre-batching is, would we want to look at the formulation before it's batched? Would we want to look at it actually out of the original container that came from the manufacturer? I think that's still a question I'm not totally clear on how we would ask it, how we would get at the details of that. I think we would want to, is my hunch, but we do need to look a little more closely at it.
And I'm just because I'm organic, and so I have to list everything that is in my tank mix before I apply anything. And so I was thinking that surfactants were part of that conversation, but I understand that they're not. What would it involve? Are surfactants used in a way that are not part of applying pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides?
That's a good question. Not that I can think of, although I guess you might use some sort of, marker maybe with a fertilizer, but I don't know, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. So, I mean, potentially part of this conversation could be that to make surfactants part of the regulatory ability of BPC? Do you have a feeling on that?
Nothing off the top of my head, but I do know that some states have, their state lead agency does have that authority.
Okay.
It could be, I'm not sure the extent of what that would mean in additional workload. There are quite a few surfactants. I couldn't give you a number of how many different products, but I would assume if you wanted to give us that regulatory oversight and not just have it be sort of a paper tiger, I guess, there would need to be some oversight of what's on the label language and so forth. And I don't know what the federal regulatory oversight of something like that is, if there's any. I know that EPA does have a list of adjuvants that can be used. I know they keep track of that. It's not like there's nothing happening in terms of regulatory framework around these materials. It's just that we don't have that authority in Maine. So I'd have to look a little bit more closely at that to give you a certain answer and feel confident that I'm not saying, sure, have us do that. And we actually need a full person to go through the process of looking at labels. I'm not sure what the workload would be, I guess.
Sure. Is it legal in the state of Maine to use vegetable oil as surfactant?
Is it legal? Yeah, I mean, so long as the label doesn't prohibit it. I mean, so that would be part of the conversation, I guess, is whatever is allowed by the label would be allowed. Certain types of materials, chemistries like oils that would be prohibited from mixing with some products. So, and frankly, there are also some pesticides that you can't tank mix because they may cause a chemical reaction that could result in, and you're shaking your head because I know you know this, but maybe not everyone does, but they could cause, a product to fall out of solution, could turn it into a sludge at the bottom of the pesticide application equipment, essentially makes it unusable or jams up your equipment so that you end up with a mess that is essentially a toxic material that you then have to find a way to get out of your tank. A story I heard the other day was a suggestion of mixing, I think it was cornstarch, sugar, and BT, because the idea being that this would produce some sort of nice web of material that would provide longevity on plants, and it did not go well. There was no batch, they call it a batch test or a jar test that you can do in advance of putting the product in a tank, and at least it was BT that was being used. So it resulted in something that had to be cleaned up, but at least it was fairly low in mammalian toxicity, but it did not go well. And it did not make a web of material that better protected the plants.
We don't recommend that. Okay, good.
No.
All right, I have a further question, Mr. Chair, if it's okay. I know I'm taking a lot of time.
Sure. We want to get this one straight, so go ahead.
On the confidential formula that you mentioned, so EPA has access to that confidential formula. Do we as a state have access to that confidential formula for products that are registered here?
That's a good question. We don't receive it automatically. I don't know to what degree we could obtain that information, or if it would be more of a matter of asking the EPA to review those confidential statements of formula and convey to us which ones contain, identified PFAS that we would be interested in. So I guess that's a long way of saying, I don't know. But there may be a possibility of getting information that's either directly that information or information that's sort of adjacent to actually getting the record of confidential statement of formula. I would imagine ultimately we would have to protect that information if we were to obtain it. So there would be some degree of, and generally speaking, we only have one type of information that we currently collect that is regulated in that way in rule, and it has to do with BT corn. Otherwise, the information that the Board of Pesticides Control collects is public information.
Okay. But it's possible that you could require it for registration in the state of Maine.
I don't know. I guess I don't know the answer to that one either. I don't know that we could require it.
Because it might be protected by federal law.
There might be some, I know that EPA requires it, but I don't know that we would have the authority to do so. I would have to check with the AG's office to see if that's something that is covered under the section of statute that pertains to registration information. We can request a fair amount of information under our current statutory allowances when it comes to pesticide registration. I'm just not clear on whether or not we can request that confidential statement of formula.
Okay. If it feels appropriate, I'm ready to make a make a motion?
Sure, now we can still further discussion, so go ahead.
Okay, I move ought to pass as amended. The amendment would strike the bill as it exists. Karen, just ask questions if you need me to go back and explain anything further. All right, hearing none. I would I would ask for, is Karen there? I'm on my phone, so I can't always see everybody.
Yeah, Karen's here.
Okay, good. I ask for a resolve. There's gonna be kind of I guess there's gonna be two portions. One's gonna be statute and one's gonna, I'm sorry, I'm figuring this out on the fly. If we make it a resolve and we ask the department to do something, does that carry the force of law?
Yes, resolve is law. Yes, and then you could require the board to report back to the committee, and pursuant to joint rule, the committee would have authority to submit a bill in the second regular session if you wanted to put something into statute.
Okay, so strike the bill as exists, write a resolve. In the resolve, we will ban all aerial application of pesticides. Pesticides is intended to include herbicides and fungicides that has been distributed or stored in HDPE containers. And that would include metal containers that had any HDPE as part of their composition. So that would be either a lid or a liner.
That sounds like something that should be in statute.
I'm banning it until they report back to us.
Megan, does the board have that authority in rule to do something like that?
We would be able to talk about adulteration, but again, the adulteration issue is, we believe, from the fluorination, not from the HDPE itself. And that's what EPA's findings are as well. So I guess when it comes to our authority to do it, yeah, I'd have to get back to you, Karen. I'm not sure that we would have the ability to act on the container, a prohibition of use because of what it's containerized in. EPA has that authority because they have that in the CFR pertaining to DOT's requirements. I'm not sure that extends to Maine and our ability to act on FIFRA.
You couldn't just remove the registration, reject the registration of any product that was labeled for aerial application that was distributed or stored in an HDPE container?
I guess the question would be, what would be the, sorry, this is a bit rhetorical, I apologize. I know I'm not meaning to be snarky at all, but I guess the question would be, what would be the justification for the HDPE container and not the fluorinated HDPE container? Is the assumption that there'd be adulteration just because of it's in an HDPE container? Because this hand sanitizer, got to stop myself. I'm out of control today.
You can have props during work sessions if the chairs allow it.
Okay. So this, for example, hand sanitizer is an HDPE container. So the assumption would have to be that this is leaching PFAS. It very well may be. But I guess that doesn't coincide with the findings thus far from EPA. And so when I mentioned adulteration, I guess that was what I had in mind, is that the adulteration would be coming potentially from the fluorination. Even that's a bit uncertain at this point. For a variety of reasons, we don't understand what the relationship is between how long a product's stored in the container and the fluorination, PFAS leaching from that. We don't understand fully heat, or we don't understand fully like that there are different levels of fluorination as well, apparently. And that may have an impact. Also, the chemistry that's inside the container, that there may be a relationship between an alcohol-based product or an oil-based product as opposed to other types of formulations. So I guess with all of that in mind, I think it's a bit of a stretch to assume that immediately it's HDPE containers that would be problematic, given that I don't know that any of the data supports that thus far.
But all of the all of the PFAS contamination has come from fluorinated HDPE containers.
That's what we understand. Yes.
We do not know which contain, like for instance, your hand sanitizer, we do not know if that was fluorinated or not fluorinated.
Precisely.
So the intent here is to, because we do not know what is fluorinated and what is not fluorinated, and we do not know what is causing PFAS contamination or not causing PFAS contamination, we are banning the HDPE containers because of potential PFAS contamination.
I mean, certainly you can identify an HDPE container by looking at the exterior of the HDPE container. You don't have to do any further digging into information from EPA that may be a part of the confidential statement of formula. So I get where you're going with it. I guess I'd suggest, doing so now may mean that products that would otherwise be used during this growing season would potentially no longer be available. That might be consideration, is that that's a lot of pressure to put on industry to try to turn things around very quickly. But that's just a statement of something you might consider.
So at the core, you have the power to register or revoke registration for any pesticide use in the state of Maine.
And ultimately, we would have to have a reason. So it would have to be that, I would think it would need to be based on being able to demonstrate that there's adulteration of some kind, or that the representation of formulation is not as indicated in any of the materials provided to us during the course of registration. Because ultimately, a company could appeal and they could seek a hearing in front of the board if, in fact, they feel that the decision is flawed.
Right, but if it was a legislative decision, if it wasn't a BPC decision, if it was the resolve, asking you to do that, then we are the reason why.
So technically, yeah, you guys can. My understanding is you can do as you like. I think I've been told that many times when I've spoken in front of this committee. So, so I suppose you do possess the authority to make that decision.
Does that make sense, Karen?
So what I'm hearing, I guess, from the department is that in Title VII, there is a tool that they could use where a pesticide is deemed adulterated and it can't be used. And so if something has one of these, if there's a pesticide that has one of these leachates, then it could be prohibited. So, but I don't know, it doesn't sound like that's enough for you at this time. I don't know if there's ever, and this might be a question for Director Patterson, I suppose it could remain a resolve if you had a moratorium on aerial application or, of pesticides that have been stored in containers that have been fluorinated, something to that effect. But then as a practical matter, we are probably talking about this going into effect in October, unless there's an emergency preamble, and then it'll last for how many months? And then they'll, it sounds like you have another part of the resolve where they would work on this during, and then report back to the committee. So, it may not, if you had a moratorium, if we can do that, it may only just be for a couple months. And I don't know, as a practical matter, if that would prevent, these are just considerations, I guess.
Okay. We cannot have one aspect of this bill be statute and the other resolve. Can we do that in one?
Well, it would just be an act. And so you'd have, one portion that amends statute or enact statute, and then another portion that would be just unallocated. And that could be where, you have the directive that the BPC study this and report back to the committee, and you give the committee authority to submit a bill in the second regular.
Okay. So it will be in statute.
Okay.
This is the new take 5. All right. So it will be in statute that no pesticides, herbicides, fungicides can be aerially applicated in the state of Maine that have been stored or distributed in an HDPE container or any container that has plastic as part of its composition, which is meant to include metal that might have plastic lids or metal that might have a plastic liner. Furthermore, no pesticide, which is meant to include herbicides and fungicides that have surfactants as part of their formulation, may be aerially applied until the Board of Pesticide Control has been I'm gonna go back to the language of the bill at this point, that they need to have a third party analysis, and has been determined that PFAS is not part of the formulation of the pesticide.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. I mean, I got the first part, prohibiting aerial application of pesticides that have been stored in those containers.
Yes.
The part about surfactants, and then you reverted back to section 3 of the bill, which is a third party analysis. So is the third party analysis that there's surfactants as part of the formulation?
No, surfactants is on the label that surfactants are part of the formulation.
Okay.
So basically you could take what the language from section 3. So conduct an aerial application of a pesticide with surfactants in its formulation, unless the board has determined that the pesticide with surfactants in the formulation have been analyzed by a third party entity not associated with the manufacturer of the pesticide, who has determined that PFAS are not part of the formulation of the pesticide.
Okay.
Great. Then moving on. Yes.
So I'm confused here.
Yes.
Is that kind of like all one thing? So what I'm hearing you say, at least this is the way I'm interpreting it, that if it's stored in plastic and or it has surfactants, until it's tested, it can't be used. If it's been tested, even if it's stored in plastic, it's okay to use it if there's no PFAS in it. So you're not banning it just because it's in a plastic container. Because boy, all of a sudden you wiped out probably all the pesticides in the state of Maine.
The hard part for that is the question of just like you brought up earlier. So they test it, it doesn't have PFAS in it, and then it sits in the hot sun for 2 days, and then it has PFAS in it. So that's my question, is how you get around that, you know? And obviously no farmer or forester has a PFAS testing kit in their back pocket they can pull out and dip just to let you check pH or something.
Right.
So I think I am banning it in plastic for aerial application. I guess unless we want to say, unless it's been tested within 24 hours of use or something like that.
Yeah, I think that would be impossible because it'd be a third party, and they're not going to be able to do it that fast anyway.
That's my feeling. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we move on to the study aspect of the bill, Karen.
Yep.
Okay. So one aspect would be to look into the ability of the BPC to request confidential formulas as a requirement for registration of pesticides in the state of Maine. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The other aspect would be to look into the potential of the BPC regulating the use of surfactants as a tank mix with pesticides in the state of Maine, particularly with an eye to looking at fluorinated surfactants. And then finally, also to report back the latest findings from the EPA and manufacturers as to the source of PFAS and in the PFAS in formulations, PFAS in storage, and that. And I guess with the ability to submit a bill in 2022, and just for the committee's knowledge, I would see that bill as potentially being able to undo what we've done with the HDPE if we find that that the manufacturers have completely eliminated all fluorination from their process, and we don't need to worry about that coming into Maine anymore. Or we could also use that to, I was doing research, and one of the pesticides, herbicides, which is aerially applied in Maine, is called Esplanade. And there's indisaflam in there, which has a fluorine ion in it. It's too much detail for us or for me, but I'd love to know what the impacts of some of that are going forward. Is that clear as mud?
Yeah, watch the YouTube video. So one thing that you could do, though, on the statutory changes is you could put a sunset on it if it makes folks feel better. And that way, when you hear back from the board in the second regular, that action needs to be taken to either retain those provisions or to repeal them. They'll be automatically repealed unless the legislature acts. I mean, that's something that you could do if it makes folks feel better about it.
Yeah, I'd be open to that. Senator Black or Senator Dill?
Well, right at the moment, Bill, I'll be honest, I could support the bill if we had in it that if the container is tested once, because none of us know if it's 2 days sitting in the sun, 3 weeks sitting in the sun, sitting in the warehouse. But if the product is tested and it's clear of PFAS, PFOS, then it can be used. If it isn't, then it can't. I'm just a little nervous about saying all plastic containers are going to be banned, because from my thinking, you just basically banned all aerial application in the state of Maine, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But if we're trying to get the PFAS and PFOS, why not test it before they get their batches, they get ready to go out to spray, it's tested. Megan may know how long it would take, how quickly they can get a turnaround on it. But I could support it then, and basically everything else you said, because my concern over PFAS and PFOS is it's a very serious problem, and we want to get it out. So if it's not in there, at least when it's tested, I can support this. Otherwise, I would say ought not to pass, and I would probably ought to pass as amended and do what I just said.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Technically, I had the floor half an hour ago, but
sorry.
Representative Pluker's recommendation took a little longer than almost as bad as the cider bill. Not quite. But I'm almost the same point of I wanted here. I wanted to originally hear your original recommendation and that you would come out with, but now hearing where you're moving with this, I'm at the same point of where Senator Dill is, that I couldn't support this banning all pesticides in plastic, and I think it's a moot point anyway, because we're not, as we've already heard, this isn't going to take effect until October, and the aerial spraying is going to be all done by then. And so we're going to be coming back. I mean, you're not going to stop them from spraying this summer, and then we're going to be taking this up again in February. But I agree with Representative Pluker that this stuff is bad. Representative McCray talked about how bad this stuff is, and I agree 100%. And I want to move forward with something that, we can take care of this. But where you're headed with this, banning everything, that's in plastic for the summer, is just beyond where I can go. I would look for a different report out, but that's where I'm at.
Representative Pluker.
Does Representative McCray might need to speak there before I do, but I would love to respond to Senator
Okay,
Hall.
Representative McCray.
or Block?
Representative O'Neill has her hand up too, so.
Yeah.
I don't dare let Representative Pluker get in ahead of me. Anyway,
Jump in and haven't had the chance, please.
I guess I'm going to go back to something I said earlier, and then what Senator Black just mentioned, it sort of impacts what I'm going to say. If it's not going to be used now, I have a question, probably of you, Ms. Neto, is, are we going to have, in order to carry this over, is it worth using one of our mystery bullets to carry this one over to February and let the BPC come back with a recommendation? My feeling is that I really, back to what I said earlier, I really don't care where this PFAS comes into the mix. If we say, when it is sprayed on that, or when it's put in the mix, just the premix at the plane site, at the airport, wherever, when it is there, there shall be no PFAS. Okay, and then perhaps if they find that under certain circumstances PFAS gets into the mix because it's been sitting in steel drums for 3 months right out on the runway, and there's PFAS in it, you're in violation. You can't do that. If it's not going to be used this summer, I think that takes away our emergency to it. But I think we need to be able to address that next spring, and maybe just having the BPC to come back, that will make it so we don't have to use one of our silver bullets and have it as a carryover. So Karen, if you want to throw in, or anybody else, I'm good.
So I guess the way to sort of get around the limitation on the number of carryovers is to, as the department suggested at the public hearing, and was to turn the act into a resolve and have BPC report back to this committee, and then you'll have authority to submit a bill in the second regular. However, it sounds like Representative Pluker wants to make some immediate changes. So that same idea of an unallocated section with his statutory changes, either way, you avoid having to vote to carry over.
All right, Representative O'Neill. I couldn't quite hear what you said, so you were muffled before, so.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's a lot less of a complicated way to do this, and that the original motion that Representative Pluker articulated does accomplish that. And I just kind of want to go through what I've heard, which is this is really bad stuff and it's urgent given the substances. We've heard about implementation date. So let's say we adjourn on June 15th and it doesn't affect the summer. It takes away the negative of not affecting growers. But the positive of putting it in place now is that it does put pressure on these big companies that make these chemicals and that have this information in their possession, just to do the right thing and get this information. So that's the value that I'm seeing of passing this in the law, the statute / resolve form that Representative Pluker articulated. And I think we have the benefit of not causing a huge disruption, but also getting this information. And why I like this bill is it puts the pressure on the company to come forward with the information that they have. And I think it's the most efficient way to go about it. And if we do, if we wait until next year, we're just gonna kick the can down the road. So I think it's the most efficient way to go about it, to go the way that he articulated it the first time.
Representative Hall.
Just a couple of thoughts. Does this really put the pressure on these big companies to come up with the information? They're gonna have finagle their way around it. But I guess my other thing is, and it's a question, and I don't know who it's to, whether it's to Representative Pluker or who, but we all know that this PFAS is really bad stuff. So why are we just trying to ban the aerial application of it? Why not the complete application of it? Because you can spray it through a ground sprayer, but if we pass this law, you can still spray it through a ground sprayer. So that's just a question.
I'm happy to answer, or if somebody else needs to go first, I can circle back.
Go ahead and answer that.
Does somebody else have their hand up? No. Okay.
No.
Okay. I mean, just looking at the applicator annual summary report coming from the folks in New Hampshire, the JBI helicopter, and I know some of this was tank mixed, so it's not a completely accurate number of total. I'm looking at sideways because it was emailed to us sideways, but it's mostly 30, 40. Roughly little less than 60,000 acres was sprayed aerially with herbicides. And so if we compare the impact of that 60,000 acres to the number of acres being applied out of a backpack sprayer, it's just a much greater effect. And that's why I'm placing the urgency on this one. I feel like Senator Black also had a question for me. What was it, Senator Black? I'm sorry.
He doesn't have one? Are you shaking your head no?
I've forgotten already.
Okay. Okay. So then going back to the storage situation. So in Massachusetts, what happened was, you get this stuff in small containers because it's super concentrated, right? And then you mix it with water or your tank mix, whatever you're gonna mix. And then they had it sitting in plastic barrels for a long time. And so when they went back and did the testing, it wasn't actually, well, there was the fluorination of the actual packaging that could have been an issue, but there was additional fluorination happening in the plastic barrels it was stored in. So if we are just depending upon the testing for PFAS from the manufacturer or when it was initially put into the container, that actually doesn't get to the issue directly, because if it is later put into plastic barrels and left in plastic barrels, then the PFAS will end up in it after the fact.
Okay, so right there, if I may interrupt. So
yes,
is really our problem not the pesticide containers, but is it mixing it and storing it in those containers? That's a whole different story than what I'm hearing you say, because if I heard you say, pesticide containers, then as you said, you got this little gallon jug or whatever, then you mix it up with water, and now it's in a 300-gallon plastic drum, and that's where you think, or somebody thinks it may have gotten the fluorination going on. So if that's where the problem is, I'm okay with that. I can live with your bill if it's that interim storage.
And the answer is it's both. So in some cases they had fluorinated, this Anvil 1010 was in fluorinated packages, and so therefore got some PFAS from that. In other situations, the Anvil 1010 wasn't in a fluorinated package, but then they still had PFAS in it when it was applied, and they figured out that it went into the barrels, got extra PFAS from the barrels, and then went out the door. So it comes from both places. Okay. Oh, that was the other thing I meant to say was we were saying that this won't have an effect this year, but as many of us heard on our talks up north, most of this herbicide is actually in the state of Maine, at least, is applied in the fall. When after the conifers have hardened up and they're not as susceptible to the glyphosate. So this bill would still have an effect this year, though not on the broccoli growers, unless the broccoli growers are growing in greenhouses, or that wouldn't work anyway. Barrel application. So I don't have I'm not, so even with the sunset provision, that doesn't help us. The Senator Dill or Senator Black, who spoke in opposition.
Senator Black, you have your hand up now.
I don't think I can support the broad pesticide containers that you've related to in your last, in your last motion. And going back to the comment you just made about up north, they are all done spraying by the time the leaves, they've got to do it before the leaves go off. In fact, we were late getting, there, and most of the spraying had been done. So it really wouldn't help in spraying in the forest land. They would be all done before the 1st of October, probably by the 1st of September, mid-September. So it wouldn't help the issue in northern Maine with forest land. But I'm really, I struggle to support the amendment you've got now.
Okay. Megan, when do they usually get done spraying forest herbicides?
Yeah, it's mid to late September.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Obviously, I've done a lot of work here. Why don't I work with Karen, draw something up, take it. It would be great if we could get some consensus on this so that we could move it through as an emergency action to have effect this year. So if folks, thank you for your time and your indulgence today. If you're comfortable with the tabling motion, I would move to table so that I can draw something up clear, pass it by the different folks in the committee, and come back with something that hopefully we can all work with together.
So you moved the table. Is there a second? Been seconded. All in favor? Just show of hands. All right. We'll table it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. So we'll close the work session on LD 264. We'll open up LD 820. Resolve to convene a working group to develop plans to protect Maine's agricultural lands when siting solar arrays. Karen.
So this bill directs the Department of ACF to convene a working group, basically what the title says, to develop plans and consider ways to discourage use of land of higher agricultural value and encourage the use of more marginal agricultural lands when siting solar arrays. And then it requires the department to submit a report to this committee, Energy and Utilities Committee, and Environment and Natural Resource Committee no later than January 1st of next year. So we heard from the sponsor that, he submitted this on behalf of a constituent, a farmer who said, who just observed that that Maine was losing some of its best agricultural land as solar arrays were being put up. We did hear from proponents that this LD aligns quite closely with another bill that's been referred to this committee, LD 856, Representative Barry's bill, an act to balance renewable energy development with natural and working lands conservation. So there was no testimony in opposition. The department testified neither for nor against. They did point out that they've taken multiple steps to develop and share information with solar developers and landowners to encourage thoughtful siting practices. They've also worked in concert with the governor's energy office. We'll be hearing about this in the context of another bill. They're launching a stakeholder group specifically designed to address issues raised in this bill. So the department said they recommend tabling this, although that could mean, continuing with the resolve and having it report back to the next legislature too. But they did suggest tabling it for future discussion or a carryover. I think what I heard from the sponsor of the bill, Senator Claxton, he, did recognize all the work that the department is doing, but I think he kind of wanted to retain the committee's authority to report out a bill. So, and Representative Barry, I don't know if we've discussed this in committee, but at least in chairs and leads planning, Representative Barry did request that the committee carry over his bill, LD 856. And if if you need a vehicle, an act is more flexible than a resolve. Because you can't turn a resolve into an act, that's another story for another time. But so an act would be more flexible if you want to make statutory changes or just have a resolve. But anyway, that's where we are with this bill.
All right, questions for Karen? Who do we have left? And Nancy McBrady. Could we have Nancy McBrady come in? Cheryl?
Yep, she's on her way.
What's taking it so long?
It's running slow today.
It's tired.
Right.
Hi, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Yes, it is.
Would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Nancy McBrady. I'm the Bureau Director for the Bureau of Agriculture, Food and Rural Resources.
So where are we with this, Director McBrady? Do you already have people working on this? And
It is in process. Together with the Governor's Energy Office, we have broadly created the outline for a stakeholder group, including potential folks to reach out to in the next week or two to get them to join. We have a time frame put forward whereby the end of the year, December 2021, we're hopefully wrapping up our analysis and recommendations and would be prepared to report back to this committee or elsewhere at the legislature about potential recommendations surrounding solar siting and agriculture in Maine. So we're close to liftoff.
so if we just basically pass this the way it is, which is just resolve directing you to put a stakeholders group together, you're basically already doing that. We get this off our table and we move on and everybody's going thumbs up. We got rid of one and everything's okay. Is that what I'm kind of hearing? I mean, is there any need to carry this over? Is there any need to table it like we possibly heard?
I think we were just suggesting that what we were doing was already in process and therefore, and because we were willing to already be reporting back, was this necessary? But if you want this to pass out as is, I don't think it contradicts or contravenes what we're attempting to do.
Right. I'm just looking at it, either we can go ought not to pass because you're doing it and get rid of it, or we can say ought to pass because you're doing it. But this just kind of firms up that you will continue to do it if we pass it.
And that's certainly okay by us.
Okay. All right, other questions? Representative Landry. You're muted, Representative.
In the interest of expediency, I move on to pass.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Any discussion? Seeing none, would you please call the roll?
LD 820 ought to pass. Senator James Dill.
Yes.
Senator James Dill, yes. Senator Russell Black.
Yes.
Senator Russell Black, yes. Senator Chloe Maxman.
Yes.
Senator Chloe Maxman, yes. Representative Maggie O'Neill.
Yes.
Representative Maggie O'Neill, yes. Representative Randall Hall.
Representative Hall, you're muted. Representative Hall, you there you go.
Yeah, yes.
Representative Randall Hall, yes.
Sorry about that.
Representative Lori Osher.
Yes.
Representative Lori Osher, yes. Representative Thomas Schofield, absent. Representative Joseph Underwood.
Yes.
Representative Joseph Underwood, yes. Representative Scott Landry.
Yes.
Representative Scott Landry, yes. Representative Bill Pluker.
Yes.
Representative Bill Pluker, yes. Representative Jeffrey Gifford.
Yes.
Representative Jeffrey Gifford, yes. Representative David McCray.
Yes.
Representative David McCray, yes. Representative Susan Bernard, absent. 11 yes, 2 absent.
Okay, on the issue of LD 820, resolved, convene a working group to develop plans to protect Maine's agricultural lands when siting solar arrays. It's ought to pass 1102. We will close the work session on LD 820. And we will open up the work session on LD 870, resolve direct from the Permanent Commission on the status of racial, indigenous, and Maine tribal populations to study the impact of policies regarding agriculture, access to land, access to grants, and access to financing on African American and indigenous farmers in the state. Karen.
I think you've summarized the bill with the title alone. So it directs the commission to report findings to this committee by January 17 of next year. And then it also provides a one-time allocation of $20,000 in the fiscal year beginning July 1st. So we only got testimony in favor of the bill. The only thing I wanted to talk about was in line 7 through 10 of the bill. So interestingly, so the commission is in Title 5, Chapter 631. And interestingly, the commission has the authority to submit to the legislature legislation as it deems appropriate. So this is interesting because, right, there's a joint rule 353 subsection 8 that says legislative or non-legislative study committees or groups are not authorized to introduce legislation, but that's kind of sort of neither here nor there because they now have it in law. So, but what I wanted to point out is if you do move forward with the bill, we may need to clarify that sentence that the commission shall report its findings and may submit legislation that serves to create equity and representation and access to agricultural programs, blah, 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 to the ACF committee, because it sounds like they have authority to submit a bill. But the ACF committee also has that authority to submit a bill. So I think we may want to clarify that if that's what you want to do, that once you receive the report pursuant to joint rule, you have authority to submit a bill if you move forward with it. So that's the only issue I kind of wanted to raise, is that sentence is a little bit muddled in my view.
Senator Black, did I see a question from you? Or are you all set?
All set.
All right. Are there any other questions for Karen? Did I see Representative, who was that? Fluker, you bounced around on me here, so.
Oh, sorry. So Karen, so you're saying the commission shall report it. I'm just looking at that sentence there in line 7. The commission shall report its findings and may submit legislation that serves. What would be your language that you would prefer?
Just the standard, because the commission already has authority to submit legislation as they see fit. That exists in Title 5 in Maine law. So just the standard language that the commission shall report findings and recommendations, including suggested legislation to this committee. Just leave it at that and not have the may submit, because they already have that in law.
I move ought to pass as amended by Karen's fix there.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Cheryl, please call the roll.
LD 870 ought to pass as amended. Senator James Dill.
Yes.
Senator James Dill, yes. Senator Russell Black.
Yes.
Senator Russell Black, yes. Senator Chloe Maxman.
Yes.
Senator Chloe Maxman, yes. Representative Maggie O'Neill.
Yes.
Representative Maggie O'Neill, yes. Representative Randall Hall.
Yes.
Representative Randall Hall, yes. Representative Laurie Osher.
Yes.
Representative Lori Osher, yes. Representative Thomas Schofield, absent. Representative Joseph Underwood.
Yes.
Representative Joseph Underwood, yes. Representative Scott Landry.
Yes.
Representative Scott Landry, yes. Representative Bill Pluker.
Yes.
Representative Bill Pluker, yes. Representative Jeffrey Gifford.
Yes.
Representative Jeffrey Gifford, yes. Representative David McCray. You're on mute, sir.
Yes, sorry.
Representative David McCray, yes. Representative Susan Bernard, absent. 11 yes, 2 absent.
For LD 870 ought to pass as amended, 11 in favor, none opposed, 2 absent, it passes. And I will close the work session on LD 870, and we'll open up the work session on LD 937, resolved to facilitate the provision of incentives of soil carbon storage. Karen.
So this bill proposes to direct the co-chairs of the Maine Climate Council to convene a stakeholder group to develop recommendations for the establishment of programs and policies designed to incentivize the effective sequestration of carbon in soils by landowners and land managers in the state. And it requires the co-chairs of the Climate Council to submit to the Joint Standing Committee on Environment and Natural Resources a report by December 1st, 2021. And then that committee would have authority to submit a bill in the second regular of the 130th. So I'll cut to the chase here. We did hear back at the public hearing from the department. They had some suggested amendments. The first was to change the report back date to September 2022. And then also to change the direction. So the directive would be rather than to the co-chairs of the Climate Council, would be to the departments of ACF and Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. So late yesterday afternoon, Representative Osher shared with me, she had been working on an amendment with the Department of ACF, and she shared that language with me, and I can read it to the committee now. And at the time, so this is something that Representative Osher worked on with Emily Horton, sent me the language. And at the time last night, they still needed to hear from the Commissioner of IFNW if they were comfortable with the language. And I did hear this morning that they are. So basically, it would obviously still be a resolve. It would direct the departments, the amendment that has been proposed is to direct the Department of ACF and Inland Fisheries and Wildlife departments to develop recommendations for the establishment of programs and policies to promote and incentivize, where appropriate, practices that increase sequestration of soil carbon on natural and working lands by farmers, landowners, and land managers, including but not limited to technical assistance and financial incentives for that purpose. The departments shall consult with stakeholders with expertise on carbon programs, agriculture, forestry, land management, and economic incentives for carbon storage, and the Natural and Working Lands Working Group of the Maine Climate Council. And then the report would come to this committee, to ACF committee, by September of 2022. So the only suggestions or things for the committee to consider is to just specify a day in September 2022 if you want to move forward with this. And because it's September and the 130th may adjourn, you know, we don't know if you'll be coming back after the second regular session for a special session. I think it would be good to specify, if you want authority to submit a bill in the 131st, first regular, to allow the committees to submit a bill to specify that in the resolve. So that's all I have.
Other questions for Karen? Representative McCray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may be a question for Karen, and it may be for Representative Osher. September seems to be, I was concerned right from the minute I heard that month that we're not going to have our teeth in this, some of us perhaps, ever again. And while it's here before us, is there a reason why it has to be September rather than, let's say, February or March?
Thank you very much for that. I had the original bill was for December of 2020 of this year, so that we would be able to put something in, or I would be able to put something in for the next half of our session. The Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry Committee was concerned because they already have two working groups going. One is for the Natural and Working Lands Forest Carbon Storage Committee, which has a report date for September of 2021. And then what we just discussed is this solar siting on agricultural lands working group. Since many of those same people would be people who'd be tasked with doing this, they asked for an extension. I'm really new here, so I didn't want to say, no, you can't have an extension, but my feeling was I want this done. So I'd love it to go faster. So I thank you for that suggestion, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Maybe February is still a little early, but is there a time that we might be able to put it that it would still be while we're in session?
A follow-up, please, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
My feeling is that, February, we are scheduled in the second half of the biennium to get done, we hope, in April. Okay, so February would only give us a couple of months to put something into action. And whereas it came from you in this session by December 18th, okay, I really hate to push it off onto the 131st. I truly do, whether I'm there or not. So I would suggest as late as we can put it and still be assured that we will get to act on it.
Karen, I was looking for Nancy McBrady to see where she
Yeah,
is.
that's what I was just going to say. I do see her in the attendees.
Yeah, I asked Cheryl to let her in, but I guess I don't know where Cheryl is, so.
I'm right here. I just missed it. Here she is.
Hi.
Well, welcome back, Director. I think you probably heard the conversation. What do you think for time frame?
Please excuse the wild rantings of children in the background. I appreciate what Representative Osher was just saying in referencing 2022 and what Karen said as well about the backstory, simply because there is work happening already by other groups right now. We just really wanted to maximize the efficiency of those efforts that are currently underway, get those done, see how they can combine and come together and not sort of create alternative tracks when people are already working on it. And that, from the department's point of view, was going to give ample time for everybody to finish the work and be able to report back.
And if we changed it to February 1st or sometime in February of 2022, do you think that will give you ample time? I mean, I hear what everybody's saying, and I hate to put you on the spot, but I guess I'm going to have to.
Yeah, I will probably gently push back and say we would still prefer to have it in 2022. I completely understand where Representative McCray is coming from and Representative Osher, but again, to allow the work that's already being done to be completed in a timely, in what we believe is the right, a timely manner, we'd like to stick to that, but obviously understand that if you disagree.
Okay, Representative McCray, you still have your hand up. You got another follow-up?
Well, it just didn't get taken down. But with all due respect, Ms. McGrady, Director, I'm going to stick with sometime in February. And if we end up going to September, so be it.
So thank you so much. My concern is that yes, I know that these groups are working. They're not working on the same thing, and that's why I've proposed this. And this is the challenge for this working group is to gather all the information from the other states and also from our state. So what have people talked about in other states? But most importantly, how would we implement this in our state? And because it's an incentive, I'm a scientist and I know lots about soil carbon and how it stores organic matter, but the incentive program is something that's really connected with the people who are managing the land and economists who can do those evaluations. And those people are actually, from my understanding, they're not sitting on that soil, the solar siting committee, nor are they sitting on the forest carbon committee, because the people we would need to hear from are people who are not on those committees, because those committees are only addressing ag land and forest land. And this is conceived as something where we would come out with a soil management plan, not a forest management plan, not an ag management plan, but how people would manage soils to do this ecosystem service, which is storing organic matter sequestering it in soils. So it both addresses this problem of CO2 in the atmosphere, but also rural jobs, because it puts people to work doing this ecosystem, helping the land do this ecosystem service. So I don't think that it's that much of an overlap. And in that case, I really appreciate Representative McCray talking about how we might complete this work in the term that we've been elected for. And so it might involve that this committee would have to convene before the other one ends in September. But there'd still be ample time, because we're talking about over a year from now to finish the work. So I guess that, I don't know how to go about this. Karen, can we talk about making that amendment for February following what Representative McCray has proposed?
Absolutely, whatever the committee wishes.
Karen, do you remember on committee work, probably in the second half, when we would technically have to be done by?
It tends to be, well, it's mid-April for second regular, so.
Well, I know that's when we get done, but I mean, like committee work.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. My thought process is, kind of go back maybe about a month. I would say by mid-March, but, sometimes late March at the very latest, committees wrap up.
So I'm just trying to give them as much time as possible if people want to move it, but I just wanted to know, could we do it March 1st instead of February 1st? Would that give us enough time? That gives them an extra month, but it also moves it back 9 months or whatever. So just thinking out loud. Representative McCray, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I meant to this time. Just try to keep you guys guessing. I think March 1 is reasonable. That may build a little fire under us too. Once we get the report as to how we process it and whatnot. So I guess my suggestion would be, as far as Representative Osher's amended proposal, to move the date back from September to March 1. And that would be up to her to do.
Okay. Representative Osher.
Thank you.
Do you think that, is March 1st going to work for you?
Yes, I am so pleased, because when I was approached and communicated with actually Hannah Pingree reached out to me, and then I spoke with Emily Horton, and I appreciated what I heard from them is that they want to make this happen, but there's this challenge with the timing. And the part of me that wanted to get this done in one session basically relented because I want to get along with everyone. But I really appreciate Representative McCray, because I also really want this to be able to be finished. And in this increment of trying to incentivize carbon storage, the increment of having a group of people evaluate it and actually talk to people who are managing land and have the economics factored in. I do want that to be finished in this term that we're serving. So I really appreciate that. And March 1st sounds, gives them one more month, and that means that we'd have to work fast, but I approve of that.
Other questions, comments? So I'm hearing amended as March 1st. Is that correct, Representative Osher? Yes. She says yes.
Yes.
Any other comments? All right. Cheryl, please call the roll.
Actually, I don't think anyone made a motion
Oh, sorry.
officially yet.
All right.
Unless I missed
it. Trying to jump the gun. Representative Landry.
I move ought to pass.
As amended.
As amended.
Seconded by Representative McCray.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Cheryl, please call the roll.
Thank you very much. LD 937 ought to pass as amended. Senator James Dill.
Yes.
Senator James Dill, yes. Senator Russell Black.
Can't hear you, Senator Black.
Yes.
There you go. Senator Russell Black, yes. Senator Chloe Maxman.
Yes.
Senator Chloe Maxman, yes. Representative Maggie O'Neill.
Yes.
Representative Maggie O'Neill, yes. Representative Randall Hall.
Yes.
Representative Randall Hall, yes. Representative Lori Osher.
Yes.
Representative Lori Osher, yes. Representative Thomas Schofield, absent. Representative Joseph Underwood.
No.
Representative Joseph Underwood, no. Representative Scott Landry.
Yes.
Representative Scott Landry, yes. Representative Bill Pluker.
Yes.
Representative Bill Pluker, yes. Representative Jeffrey Gifford.
Yes.
Representative Jeffrey Gifford, yes. Representative David McCray.
Yes.
Representative David McCray, yes. Representative Susan Bernard, absent. 10 yes, 1 no, 2 absent.
Representative Underwood, what is your preference on, you voted against this?
Yes, this bill is not needed.
Okay, so it's just straight ought not to pass.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So on LD 937, resolve to facilitate the provision of incentives for soil carbon storage, ought to pass as amended, 10-1-2. It passes to go forward. And I will close the work session on LD 937. And I'll turn back to Karen, who has 2 or 3 last pieces of business for us.
Thank you. So the first thing I just wanted to have you just review the committee amendments to LD 519, an act to protect children from exposure to toxic chemicals. So the majority report amends the bill, basically saying a person may not apply glyphosate or dicamba within 75 feet of school grounds, rather than, that's what the amendment does. And then it strikes the environmental risk advisory committee section and replaces it with a medical advisory committee instead. So that's the majority report. And then the minority report keeps the prohibition to how it was drafted in the bill, which would be herbicides that are synthetic may not be applied within 75 feet, but it does provide for an exemption. Herbicides used to control plants that pose a dermal toxicity hazard are exempt from the prohibition, and it strikes the ERAC from the bill. So those are the two committee reports. Any questions? Okay. So now I have some fiscal note reviews. I'll go with the more complicated one first. So I sent this to you this morning. So we got the fiscal note for LD 486, which was originally a resolve directing the Bureau of Parks and Lands to convey a parcel in Township 12, Range 13. So this is the common and undivided interests.
Representative, excuse me, Karen, Representative Fluker.
Could you just point me in where so I could read along with you?
Sure. So if you go to the committee website.
Yes.
And then you look under committee materials.
Yes.
And then there's a long list of LDs.
Yes, thank you.
Just click on the electronic file for LD 486, which is what I'm covering now.
Thank you very much.
It should be fiscal note for committee amendment. So anyway, there is a fiscal note required. So what the committee amendment did, instead of directing them to convey that parcel, you directed the Bureau to include in their annual report on public reserve, non-reserve public, and submerged lands, which is submitted to the committee by March 1st every year, to give us a progress report on their efforts to consolidate common and undivided public lot parcels that are held in common with private landowners. And we did hear that there's probably 10 to 11 of these remaining in the state. So that's fine, but the problem is this is a resolve, and resolves are an instrument that are limited in duration and scope, and the rule of thumb is 5 years or less. So the revisor's office didn't like having the annual report requirement in a resolve. So, we also have another problem, which is that you cannot turn a resolve into an act. And that's another story, because that is not written anywhere, but it was a ruling of a speaker years ago. And I tell you what, it's the hardest thing to overturn, even though it's not. Trust me, our office has tried to turn a resolve into an act, and it just doesn't happen. So you're kind of limited in what you can do. So what I was going to suggest is that you could just say, until March 1st, 2026, the Bureau of Parks and Lands will update the committee on their efforts to consolidate common and undivided parcels. And I just wanted to run that by you all, because that's substantively different than what you voted on.
Can we add a sentence there too, and then say, and the resolve will be looked at again, or do we need to say that, or, to see if we can renew it, or is it just goes without saying, just do it for 5 years? And
yeah, it would go without saying.
Okay. Good.
Okay. So yes, there is a fiscal note required, but it says it's a minor cost increase. Any additional costs as a result of reporting requirements can be absorbed within existing budgeted resources. So any questions about that?
Is that substantial enough that we have to reconsider revote?
No, I don't think so, unless there's any objection. I mean, I think because by default resolves are limited in duration,
okay.
It just kind of makes it clear that, it is 5 years or less. So
all right,
the revisors will be happy. So the next one I have is LD 66. This is the Act to Improve Livestock and Poultry Preparation fiscal note. It was unanimous, ought to pass as amended report, and there is a fiscal note required. Minor cost increase to the general fund, minor revenue increase to the general fund, and minor revenue increase to other special revenue fund. So under the details and notes, it says the additional workload associated with the minimal number of new cases filed in the court system does not require additional funding at this time. Any additional cost to the Department of ACF as a result to the changes to the laws governing preparation of livestock and poultry products for human consumption are anticipated to be minor and can be absorbed within budgeted resources. Any questions about that? Seeing none. And the last one I have is LD 437, an act to establish the Maine Healthy Soils Program. This was a divided report, but the ought to pass as amended report was the majority report. So basically, if you recall, this establishes this, Maine Healthy Soils Program within the Department of ACF. And the reason why there's a fiscal note is it's basically just $500 literally as a placeholder in the other special revenue funds. So that's why there's a fiscal note. It's just there are no funds currently dedicated for this purpose, but it's a placeholder. So there is a fiscal note created.
Okay. Any other questions for Karen? Anything else for us, Karen?
No, that's it.
Cheryl, anything? Okay, motion to adjourn, someone? Scott, Landry? Seconded by Representative Pluker. All in favor? None opposed. Thank you all.
Have a good weekend, guys.
You too.
On
Good night.
Tuesday.
See you Tuesday.